Are we live? Are we live? We're live. We're live. Let me see. Just make sure. We're live. We're live. Just make sure. There you man. Okay, we're live. Welcome, everybody. We are currently going to get started on chapters 5 and 6 of the ISSA 35 personal trainer chapters. For the accredited exam, we're gonna go over the principles of biomechanics, and then we're going to go over energy and metabolism in the anatomy session. The biomechanics session, like examination way, the applied science session of the exam. Biomechanics, the study of human motion. So we'll identify the planes of motion. We're going to be the frontal plane, anterior and posterior. The The other is going to be the sagittal plane between the left and right, and the transverse plane between the superior and inferior halves of the body. Then identify joint motions and muscle actions like abduction, extension, flexion, concentric, eccentric, isometric. We'll also going to go over it. And identify how many mechanical principles apply to the human body, like the range of motion, the angles, and the levers. I'm going to give you some advice before we start, and this goes for anything in life. If you want to study, if you want to get prepared, even it applies to personal training as well. Because at the end of the day, everything in life comes with planification. So in this case, we're trying to get ready for the NCCPT accredited exam, right? We already know that it's 140 multiple choice questions. 125 of them are going to be graded. The important thing to focus on while we review this material is that we need to not memorize, but to understand the concepts that we see on this chapter. This is why I'm taking also the terminology so that you get familiar with it. And then if you see that terminology on on a on an exam question, you already know, oh, this is what it means. So you get more familiar with what the possibility of the answer might be. At the end, that's the purpose. So don't get overwhelmed by the amount of information that we get. Instead, try to understand it. The more that you see it, the more that you're going to be able to recognize it. The same applies when learning a language. We are literally learning a language while we are doing this because we are learning the terminology for what we are going to later see on the final exam. And this is why we also do the practice quizzes and at the end the practice exam before doing the actual exam. Because once you get to the actual exam, you're going to be ready for it no matter what, because that's how memory works. And another advice I'm going to give you all: sleep. You need to sleep. I mean, I'm being serious. You need to sleep. A human body needs at least from 8 to 10 hours of sleep, or 7 to 8. If you don't sleep, then it's harder to do the everyday tasks of life. You can do them, but in order for to pass an exam, the memory retention gets stronger when you sleep well. Uh, Today, I feel a little bit tired. I'm not gonna lie, but I still understand that if I wanna retain all the information, like for example from yesterday, I need better sleep. If I have good sleep, then I will be able to remember everything. So that's very important as well. Anyways, let me see. Uh, just in here, we review this material, is that we need to not memorize, but it's looking good. All right, so we'll get started, man. Honestly, uh, remember everything is gonna be in the live classes. This is gonna be chapter 5, concepts of biomechanics, and then chapter 6, energy and metabolism. So we'll get started with the the CPT Model 3. And the reason I'm recording all this is because, like, in order, like, once everything is out, once I'm able to be, like, ready for the final exam, then all these materials is going to help me review for the topics that I'm going to see later on. So we'll get started. We're gonna go. the Model 3, the concept of biomechanics, and we are also going to look at the workbook, and after the workbook, we're going to see the quiz. So let's get started. Also taking in my notes in here. This chapter has 7 sessions. So chapter 5, concepts of biomechanics. So before starting, what is biomechanics? Biomechanics is the study of mechanical laws governing the movement of living organisms. Biomechanics is the science behind why we move, why we are moving. The study of mechanical laws governing the movement of living organisms. So it influences how we enhance performance by utilizing mechanical principles to improve our clients' exercise techniques and to modify specific training protocols to make an exercise harder or easier. It utilizes mechanical principles to improve a client's exercise techniques and to modify specific training protocols. Understanding biomechanics is the foundation of good technique. So biomechanics is the study of mechanical laws governing the movement of living organisms, and it influences how we enhance performance by utilizing mechanical principles to improve our clients' exercise techniques and to modify specific training protocols to make an exercise harder or easier. Utilizing mechanical principles to improve clients' exercise techniques and to modify specific training protocols. Uh, Understanding biomechanics is the foundation of a good technique. To understand biomechanics is the foundation of having a good technique in order to be able to teach our clients how to perform proper techniques for their workouts. So you have to apply biomechanics to clients' understanding. Apply the biomechanics to a client's understanding. So all this terminology is mainly so that you get familiar with it, but clients normally are not going to be familiar with the terminology that we're going to be implementing. That's why this is common knowledge. This is general knowledge that you're going to be able to use in your personal training environment. To apply biomechanics to a client's understanding. So normally you can say to a client, hey, get into the supine position. Maybe the client's not going to know what the supine position is. It's laying upside down. No, it's laying face up, supine. Uh, like sit-ups, supine, laying face up, prone, upside down. But this is something that you have to teach your clients if they're curious about learning it. Apply biomechanics to clients' understandings. So the learning objectives for this chapter, these are going to be the learning objectives. To define the vocabulary terms for an anatomical position and movement. You need to define the vocabulary terms for anatomical position and movement. Then you need to explain the Newton's laws of motion. There are 3 laws. Describe the class of levers, they're going to be 3, and give examples of each within the human body. And finally, explain the key concepts of muscles as the movers of the body. I'm going to go over the terms that we're going to look over in chapter 5, concept of biomechanics. We're going to go over anatomical positions. We're going to go over anatomical location terms. We're going to go over the planes of motions, the planes of movement motions, which are going to be transverse plane, frontal plane, and sagittal plane. Then you have the Newton's first, second, and third law. Newton's first law is the law of inertia. Second law is acceleration. And third law is going to be action and reaction. And you have 3 classes of levers. You have 3 levers like that includes fulcrums, resistance, and effort. You have muscle rolls in movement. You have muscle rolls in movement. You have the agonist that is going to be the contracted. The antagonist is going to be relaxed. The synergist is the one that assists, and the stabilizers, minimize movement. You need to know the anatomical movement terms. And finally, you have the muscle parts in different body regions, and the anatomical movement terms and the muscle parts in different body regions. And all of this information is very complex in the workbook. So we're going to be spending some time in the workbook as well. And muscle parts, anatomical movement terms, and the muscle parts in different body regions. So again, the learning objectives for this chapter. So you have to apply biomechanics to clients' understandings. The learning objectives for these chapters is going to be to define the vocabulary terms for anatomical position and movement, describe the Newton's laws of motion, explain so learning objective is going to be to define the vocabulary terms for anatomical position and movement, You need to explain uh, you need to explain the Newton's law of motion. You need to explain the Newton's laws of motion. Explain the Newton's laws of motion. Then you need to describe the classes of levers and give examples of each within the human body. Describe the classes of levers and give examples of each within the human body. And finally, you need to explain the key concepts of muscles as the movers of the body. Explain the key concepts of muscles as the movement of the body. So that the learning objectives define the vocabulary terms for anatomical position and movement, explain the Newton's laws of motion, uh, describe the class of levers and give example of each, and then give examples of each within the human body, and finally, uh, explain the key concepts of muscles as the movers of the body. Explain the key concepts of muscles as the movers of the body. So in here, the anatomical positions. The anatomical position is going to be the standard body orientation used when describing anatomy. So the anatomical position is going to be the standard body orientation used when describing anatomy. Facing forward, arms at the sides, and palms and toes straight ahead. This is the standard anatomical position. Palms are facing forward as well. The palms are facing forward like this. So the standard body orientation that we use when describing anatomy. The standard body orientation that we use when describing anatomy is going to be right and left sides of the body is going to be the subjects opposite of ours. Uh, the anatomical location terms, you have anterior or ventral, you have deep, you have posterior or dorsal, you have superficial, you have superior, unilateral, uh, inferior, you have bilateral, proximal, distal, ipsilateral, contralateral, medial, caudal, lateral, cephalic, prone, volar, and supine. Uh, all are listed in the textbook, and as a matter of fact, that's going to be the first terms that we're going to be looking at when we look at the in here at the workbook, the anatomical location terms for each of them, and then the actions. They're going to be the anatomical location terms. All are listed in the textbook. Now, the anatomical location terms, anterior view versus lateral view. This is going to be like for for each of them, they are two that are opposite to each other. The anterior view, this one, the lateral view, like this. Then superior versus inferior. Superior up is inferior down. Anterior ventral versus posterior dorsal. Anterior ventral versus posterior dorsal. Ventral and dorsal. Let me take a look. What was the definition of ventral? I know that dorsal is going to be like uh, anterior or ventral, the front of the body. Posterior or dorsal, back of the body. So dorsal is like posterior and anterior is like ventral. So that's why anterior ventral and posterior dorsal is going to be the same thing. Anterior ventral, posterior dorsal. So ventral is in the front, dorsal is in the back. Remember that anterior ventral versus posterior dorsal. Now the planes of movement. The planes of movement. You have sagittal, frontal, and transverse. Describe how a movement is taking place, whether it's in its rotational sagittal plane. So the planes of movement. Describe how a movement is taking place, whether it is rotational, sagittal plane, front to back, and side to side. Movement cannot break the specific plane. The movement cannot break the specific plane that we are dividing. The planes of movement. Describe how a movement is taking place. The planes of movement, it describes how a movement is taking place, whether it is rotational, sagittal plane, front to back, and side to side. Movement cannot break the specific plane that we are dividing. The movement cannot break the specific plane that we are dividing. The transverse plane is going to divide the body between inferior and superior halves. Inferior in the legs and superior halves in the upper body. Movement is done in a rotational manner. Transverse plane is going to be done in side to side rotational manner. Frontal plane divides the body in the anterior and posterior halves. Is going to be is going to be the posterior half is the front and back, anterior and posterior half the front and back, or the ventral and dorsal sides. Movement is done in a side-to-side motion. Example is going to be lateral shoulder raise and lateral lunges. Any movement done in a side-to-side motion will be done in the frontal plane, lateral shoulder raise and lateral lunges, etc. And the sagittal plane is going to divide the body into the left and right half. Any movement done moving front to back. Example is going to be squats, chest press, and forward lunges. The movements done in multiple planes of motion is going to be multiplanar movements. Place of movement describe how a movement is taking place. Describe how a movement is taking place. So the transverse plane has whatever the inferior and superior halves. Rotation side to side. Now frontal plane is going to divide the body into anterior and posterior halves. Front and back, and movement is done in side to side motion. Movement is done in side to side motion. Lateral shoulder raise, example. Lateral lunges, and finally the sagittal plane is going to divide the body into the left and right halves. This body into left and right halves. Front to back, right squats, chest press, forward lunges. The movement done in multiple planes of motion is going to be multiplanar movements. Movements done in multiple planes of motion is going to be the multiplanar movements. Multiplanar movements. So the Newton's first law of motion, you have three laws. The first law of motion is going to be inertia, push, maximum amount of force that we can produce. The Newton's first law of motion is going to be inertia or push, the maximum amount of force that we can produce. Body in motion tends to stay in motion and body at rest tends to stay at rest unless it is acted on by an outside force. So the first law of motion is going to be inertia or push, maximum amount of force that we can produce. Think about it in how it applies when developing strength. You have to think about it when it applies. Think about it in how it applies when developing strength. The inertia, the maximum amount of force that we can produce. So think about it in how it applies when developing strength. Body in motion. Body in motion tends to stay in motion and body at rest tends to stay at rest unless it is acted on by an outside force. So the maximum amount of force that we can produce to change the direction of a given body is going to be the maximum amount of force that we can produce to change the direction of a given body. It's going to be the law of inertia. Now, Newton's second law of motion is going to be the law of acceleration or power. The law of acceleration. Newton's second law of motion is the law of acceleration. It's going to be speed and how fast we can move something with force. The law of acceleration is going to be given by speed and how fast, or how fast the Newton's second law of motion. Acceleration is going to be speed or how fast we can move something with force. Newton's second law of motion is going to be the law of acceleration or the law of the speed or how fast we can move something with force. Newton's second law of motion is going to be acceleration, the speed or how fast we can move something with force. The force is going to be mass times acceleration, speed or how fast we can move something with force. The force is going to be equal to mass times acceleration, and work is going to be equal to force times distance, or it's going to be mass times acceleration times distance. It's going to be work. So force is mass times acceleration, and work is going to be force times distance. Definition. A change in the acceleration of mass occurs in the same direction as the force that it is causing it. So a change in the acceleration of mass occurs in the same direction as the force that is causing it. A change in the acceleration of mass occurs in the same direction as the force that is causing it. A change in the acceleration of mass occurs in the same direction as the force that is causing it. Now that's going to be so you have the mass, you have the force going in the same direction. A change in the acceleration of mass occurs in the same direction as the force that is causing it. That makes sense. Now the Newton's third law of motion. The Newton's third law of motion is going to be the action and reaction. Newton's third law of motion says for every reaction there is an equal and opposite reaction. The law of action and reaction. The Newton's third law of motion says that for every action there is an equal but opposite reaction. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. That's going to be the Newton's third law of motion, the law of action and reaction. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now the topics of levers is going to be a complex topic to look at. Levers. It's topic within the biomechanics that has to do with mechanical machines within the human body. The levers. Three classes: fulcrums, resistance, and effort. So the levers. Topic within biomechanics that has to do with the mechanical machines within the human body. That's levers. Topics within biomechanics that has to do with the mechanical machines within the human body. So consists of a rigid bar and an axis point of rotation that the levers move around. Consists of a rigid bar and an axis or point of rotation that the levers move around. Rotate around an axis or a fulcrum as a result. They rotate around an axis or a fulcrum as a result of the force, as a result of the force or the load, external object or effort forced by body that is applied to move the weight against the applied resistance. Mm. So the lever consists of a rigid bar and an axis or point of rotation that the levers move around. So they rotate around an axis or a fulcrum as a result of the force or the load, external object, or effort forced by the body that is applied to move the weight against the applied resistance. That is applied to move the weight against the applied resistance. So they rotate around an axis or a fulcrum as a result of the force or the load, external object, or effort forced by body that is applied to move the weight against the applied resistance. Against the applied resistance. So the joints is going to be so the joints is going to be the axis or the fulcrums. So the joints are going to be known as the axis or the fulcrums. The muscles of our body are what we suppose where we use to supply the effort to move our bones within our bodies. So the muscles of our bodies is what we use to supply the effort to move our bones within our bodies. So the muscles is what we use to supply the effort to move the bones within the bodies, and the bones is going to be the levers within the human body. The bones is going to be the levers between the human body. The joints are going to be known as the axis or the fulcrums, and the muscles are going to be what we use to supply the effort to move bones within the body, to move our bones within the body. So the joints, yeah, the bones is going to be the levers within the human body. The joints are going to be the axis or fulcrums, and the muscles are going to be what we use to supply the effort to move bones within the body. What we use to supply the effort to move bones within the body. Now, the load is going to be, they can come from gravity. The load, they can come from gravity or some sort of external resistance that we have. The load, it can come from gravity or some sort of external resistance that we have. From gravity or some sort of external resistance that we have. So three classes of lever within a human body. There are three classes of levers within the human body. We have the fulcrums, which are going to be the joints. The joints are the fulcrums or the axis of rotation. The resistance is going to be the external force coming on us, and the effort is going to be the muscles and where the muscles are located to differentiate between the first, second, and third class levers that is there that we have. You have first, second, and third class levers that is there. Third class lever is the most common lever that we have. The third class lever is the most common lever that we have in our body as it relates to human movement. The third class lever is the most common lever that we have in our body as it relates to human movement. So the third class lever is the most common one in our body as it relates to human movement. The first class lever is going to be the fulcrum. The fulcrum is going to be the joints. It's going to be located between the effort or the muscle that is doing the work and the resistance, which is going to be the load. Relatively rare within the human body because that's a fulcrum, which is going to be the joint is to be located between the effort, which is going to be the muscle doing the effort, and the resistance, which is going to be the load. An example is going to be the spool sitting on the neck, since it it is placed the spool is placed on the neck and it's not going to move. It's going to stay upright. You can move it right, you can move it left, but you can never move it away from its point of rotation. Remember that the school it was connected by the pivot joint. If I'm not mistaken. I really hope I'm not, because this is part of the exam. The pivot joint is in the school. This is going to be connected by the pivot joint. The ball and socket joint is in this is the hinge joint, the saddle joint. These other joints in the fingers, the ellipsoid joint, and the gliding joint. So, anyways, we continue here. So the first class level, is going to be the fulcrum located between the effort and the resistance. The fulcrum located between the effort and the resistance, the load. Relatively rare within the human body. Skull sitting on the neck. The second class lever, you have the load or the weight. The load or the weight, the resistance is going to be located between the fulcrum, which is going to be the axis or joint rotation, and the effort. Which is going to be the muscle doing the work. The load is located between the fulcrum, the axis or joint, and the effort. The load located between the fulcrum, axis or joint, and the effort. And in this case, it's going to be, you have to imagine the toe joints as the pivot, the toe joints as the pivot, the fulcrum, and the Achilles tendon to provide the effort to overcome the resistance that is gravity, body weight, and the load is located in the middle. Like when we do uh, when we do the exercise for the calves exercise where you're standing up and you are going up, like just working on the calves. That's when you use a second class lever, because the load is located between the fulcrum, which is going to be the axis or joints of the toe joints, and the effort, which is going to be the resistance of the effort. Oh, sorry, the effort is going to be the muscle that is doing the work, which is going to be in the calf muscles, and the load is located in the middle. The toe joints are the pivot, the fulcrum, and the Achilles tendon to provide the effort. The Achilles tendon to provide the effort to overcome the resistance that is gravity, body weight, and the load that is located in the middle. So load located between the fulcrum and the effort for the second class levers. And finally, the third class lever is going to be the most common lever that we have in our body as it relates to human movement. The most common lever is third class lever. The most common lever is third class lever. The most common lever arm that we see within the human body, the most common lever arm that we see within the human body, where the effort is going to be located between the fulcrum and the load. The effort is going to be located between the fulcrum or the axis uh, of or the axis joint and the load, which is going to be the effort of the arm. So the most common lever arm that we see within the human body, where the effort is going to be located between the fulcrum and the load. Example is going to be a dumbbell curl. In a dumbbell curl, you have the fulcrum, which is going to be the elbow joint, and the load, which is going to be the the biceps. The load, sorry, is going to be the dumbbell. The dumbbell is going to be the no, actually the load. So the effort is going to be located between the fulcrum and the load. So the effort is going to be the muscle that is doing the work. So the effort is going to be the biceps branching. So that's why the third class lever is the most common, because the effort is going to be located between the fulcrum and the load. The load is going to be up here. The load is going to be in the biceps curl. The the effort the load is in the dumbbell. The load is in the dumbbell. The amount of weight in the dumbbell. The fulcrum is going to be the elbow joint, and the effort is going to be in the biceps branching. So the effort is located between the fulcrum and the load. The effort of the elbow joint is going to be located between the fulcrum of the elbow. No, sorry, the effort. The one I'm talking about. The effort of the biceps branch is located between the fulcrum of the elbow and the load of the weight. And that's true. So the most common lever arm that we see within the human body, where the effort is located between the fulcrum and the load. Example is going to be a dumbbell curl. The pivot point is going to be the elbow joint, and the lever arm, is going to be the fore and pivot points are going to be the elbow joint and the lever arm and the forearm. The bicep muscle is the effort. The bicep muscle is the effort provided to overcome resistance or the load from our hand. The bicep muscle is the effort provided to overcome the resistance or the load from our hand. Now, mechanical disadvantage because the load is further away from the pivot point than the effort is. The mechanical disadvantage because there is a mechanical disadvantage because the load is further away from the pivot point than the effort is. The mechanical disadvantage is that the load is further away from the pivot point than the effort is. And it's true. The center to keep than the effort is to keep our center of gravity and joints stacked over one another, kinetic change align body's position to move more efficiently. To keep our center of gravity and joints stacked over one another, kinetic change aligned, body is in position to move more efficiently. So you need to keep our center of gravity and joints stacked over one another. Keep our center of gravity and joints stacked over one another. Kinetic change aligned. Keep our center of gravity and joints stacked over one another. Kinetic change aligned. Body is in position to move more efficiently. If the kinetic change is aligned, the body is in position to move more efficiently. To move more efficiently. Keep our center of gravity and joints stacked over one another. If the kinetic change is aligned, then you have the body that is in position to move more efficiently. To move more efficiently. Now, muscle roles in movement. So remember, first class lever, the fulcrum located between the effort and the resistance. Second class lever is about the load, where it's located between the fulcrum and the effort. And third class lever is going to be the effort located between the fulcrum and the load. Pivot point is going to be the elbow joint, the lever arm, the forearm. Pivot point is going to be the elbow joint, the lever arms, and the forearm. So muscle roles, muscle roles in movement. So keep our center of gravity and joints stacked over one another. Kinetic change is aligned. Body is in position to move more efficiently. Body is in position to move more efficiently. Now, muscle roles in movement. Muscle roles in movement. What muscles are contributing to a given exercise when we are performing? What muscles are contributing to a given exercise when that we are performing? The muscle roles in movement. What muscles are contributing to a given exercise that we are performing? Muscle roles in movement, you have four types of muscles. what muscles are contributing to a given exercise that we are performing. You have four types of muscle roles in movement. You have the agonist. The contracted is the agonist. The antagonist is going to be the relaxed. The synergist, which is going to be the assistant muscles, the synergist, and the stabilizers, which are the ones that minimize movement. The stabilizers minimize movement. The agonist is going to be contracted, antagonist relaxed. The synergist is going to be the ones that the assistants, the ones that assist the agonists, and the stabilizers are the ones that minimize movement. Biceps curl. Biceps curl, for example. In the biceps curl, the biceps, which is going to be the contracted, in the biceps curl, the biceps, which is going to be the contracted muscle, have the agonist role. And the triceps are going to have the relaxed antagonist role. In the triceps have the antagonist role. Terms for anatomical movement. Now you have the terms for anatomical movement, which are all going to be listed in the textbook. But you have, for example, abduction. For terms for anatomical movement, all are going to be listed in the textbook. All are going to be listed in the textbook. You have the abduction, moving away, abduction, movement towards, flexion, extension, lateral flexion, protraction, retraction, elevation, depression, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, external and internal rotation, circumduction, inversion, eversion, pronation, supination, pronation facing down, supination facing up, hyperextension, ipsilateral, contralateral, lateral, and medial. All of these terms, the terms for anatomical movement terms, and muscle parts in different body regions. And finally, you have muscle parts in different body regions. You have primary movements like flexion and extension of the elbow joint. You have primary movements like the flexion and extension of the elbow joint, abduction and adduction of the forearm, up and down respectively, an external and internal rotation of the forearm. An external and internal rotation of the forearm. All listed in the textbook. Primary movements gonna have flexion and extension, abduction and adduction, external and internal rotation. And that's gonna be it. Now we're gonna go over the workbook and you're gonna see. And here you have the terms of the concepts of biomechanics. Concept of biomechanics. Okay, that's the one that I saw the other day, yesterday. So now we go over the concepts of biomechanics. Chapter 5, Concepts of Biomechanics, is going to be really freaking long. So this is going to take a while. After that, I'm going to take a break. But the concepts of biomechanics. Chapter 5, Concepts of Biomechanics. So first, you have the definition for anatomical location terms. So we're going to go over each of these. In total, you have 19. You have 19 terms. So anterior or ventral is going to be the front of the body or toward the front relative to another reference point. Posterior or dorsal, you have back of the body or toward the back relative to another reference point. Anterior or ventral in the front, posterior or dorsal in the back. Superior is going to be above a reference point. Inferior is going to be below a reference point. That is really easy. Proximal position closer to the center of the body relative to a reference point. Distal position further from the reference point. Medial position relatively closer to the midline of the body. And lateral is going to be position relatively further from the midline of the body. Opposites medial and lateral. Prone is going to be laying face down. Supine is going to be laying on one's backside, laying face up. Now, deep is going to be further beneath the surface relative to another reference point. Deep is going to be further beneath the surface relative to another reference point, and superficial is going to be closer to the surface relative to another reference point. Unilateral refers to only one side. Unilateral, like my right arm, refers to only one side. Bilateral refers to both sides, right and left arms. Unilateral one side, bilateral both sides. Ipsilateral on the same side, all of my left arm and my left legs. Ipsilateral is on the same side. Contralateral on the opposite side, like my right hand and my left leg. Ipsilateral on the same side, contralateral on the opposite side. Caudal is going to be toward the bottom. Cephalic toward the head. Remember this. Caudal is towards the bottom. Cephalic towards the head. Caudal is in the feet. Cephalic is in the head. Caudal toward the bottom, cephalic towards the head, and finally volar related to the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot. Volar is going to be related to the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot. If you talk about volar, you're relating to the palm of the hand, to the palm of the head, of the hand, sorry, that relating to the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot, or the sole of the foot. Volar relating to the palm of the hand or the sole of the foot. Yeah, yes. And now for the other for the other anatomical terms, this is gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. It's gonna be 23. Some of them are the same as the other ones, like abduction, abduction and adduction. You need to know the difference. Abduction is the movement away from the midline. Abduction is movement toward the midline. I saw this so many times that it's impossible for me to forget, and if I forget it because I was distracted, but abduction is away, abduction is towards. So it's so many times because it's confusing, right? It's like almost the same word. But AB is away, AD is towards. That's what you have to remember. Abduction is movement away from the midline, and adduction is movement toward the midline. Flexion is movement decreasing the angle between two body parts. Extension movement increasing the angle between two body parts. Lateral flexion is going to be flexion in the frontal plane. So when you do in the frontal plane, you are you're flexing in the frontal plane, which means you're flexing laterally because when you flex laterally, it's in the frontal plane. Lateral flexion is going to be flexion in the frontal plane. Protraction is going to be abduction of the scapula. The scapula, which is going to be, remember, uh, the this is going to be the clavicle and the scapula, like beside the humerus in the upper body. So abduction is going to be like this. Abduction of the scapula uh, is going to be protraction. It's going to be protraction right here. Protraction is going to be abduction of the scapula. Abduction of the scapula when you're doing lateral shoulder raises. Abduction, you're doing protraction right here. This is you're doing protraction. Protraction, abduction of the scapula. Retraction is going to be adduction of the scapula. So uh, you're handing down and getting close to to the body. So abduction of the scapula is protraction, and retraction, abduction of the scapula. Protraction up 90 degrees, retraction down 0 degrees. Adduction of the scapula. Elevation, movement in the superior direction. Elevation is movement in the superior direction, and depression is going to be movement in an inferior direction. Plantar flexion is going to be talking about the foot. Plantar flexion is going to be extension of the foot downward inferiorly. Plantar flexion is when the foot is going inferiorly. This is going to be plantar flexion right here. Extension of the foot downward inferiorly. Dorsiflexion is going to be flexion of the foot upward superiorly. So plantar flexion is going to be plantar. You're planting it. That's why the extension of the foot is downward inferiorly. Dorsiflexion, the flexion, so extension of the foot downward inferiorly. And dorsiflexion, you're flexing the foot upward superiorly. So you're flexing the foot upward. Plantar flexion, you're extending the foot downwards, and dorsiflexion is going to be you're flexing the foot upward superiorly. Superiorly. Now, external External rotation is going to be rotational movement away from the midline. External rotation, you're rotating away from the midline. So you're rotating away from the midline. That's why it's external rotation, because you're rotating away from the midline. And internal rotation, you're rotating toward the midline. So this is external rotation right here. Look how my hands are moving away from the midline. External rotation. And internal rotation, look how my hands are moving toward the midline. A movement, rotational movement toward the midline, internal. External away from the midline, internal rotation toward the midline. Circumduction, circular movement of a limb extending from the joint where the movement is controlled. So circumduction is, both of these are circumduction, because you are doing a circular movement of a limb extending from the joint where the movement is controlled. And I'm working my ball and socket joiner here too. So circumduction is going to be circular movement of a limb extending from the joint where the movement is controlled. Circular movement of a limb extending from a joint where the movement is controlled. That's circumduction. Circular movement of a limb extending from the joint where the movement is controlled. The circumduction. Inversion is going to be movement of the sole of the foot toward the medial plane. So inversion is when the foot is going to go toward the medial plane, and eversion is movement of the sole of the foot away from the medial plane. So inversion is going to be a movement of the sole of the foot toward the midline plane. So you're putting your foot in where it's going to be inversion, and eversion is going to be a movement of the sole of the foot away from the midline plane. Pronation is going to be moving of the sole of the foot away from, no, sorry. Pronation is going to be about the hand. So yeah, inversion is going to be moving of the sole of the foot away toward the midline plane is going to be inversion. Toward the midline plane is going to be inversion, and eversion is going to be movement of the sole of the foot away from the midline plane. Inversion is the sole of the foot toward the midline plane, and eversion is going to be the sole of the foot away from the midline plane. Now pronation is going to be Pronation is going to be turning the palm or arch of the foot down. Pronation is, this is my foot, is down. Turning the, no, this is my hand. The palm or the arch of the foot down. Pronation is going to be turning the palm or arch of the foot down. That's why it's pronated. It's going to be face down. Pronation is going to be turning the palm or the arch of the foot down. And supination is going to be turning the palm or arch of the foot up. Supination is right here. Pronation turning the palm or arch of the foot down. Supination is going to be turning the palm or arch of the foot up. Hyperextension. Extension is extended, right? Hyperextension is going further than that. Hyperextension is a position that extends beyond anatomical neutral. So you're hyperextending your limb. If I go further than this, I'm hyperextending. Hyperextension is going to be a position that extends beyond anatomical neutral. Hyperextension is a position that extends beyond anatomical neutral. Ipsilateral, same side movement. You are moving in the same side. You're going in the same side, like my right foot and my right leg are going on the same side. As ipsilateral, same side movement. You're moving towards the same side, or you're all going towards the front. Contralateral is going to be opposite side movement. So you go from right and left. So you have your right hand and your left foot moving opposite sides. Ipsilateral is same side movement, and contralateral is opposite side movement. So lateral is going to be situated away from the midline. Lateral is going to be situated away from the midline, and medial is going to be situated toward or closer to the midline. Lateral situated away from the midline, and medial is going to be situated toward or closer to the midline. And those are the anatomical location terms. And any of them can be in that exam at any time. So it's super important that you are able to know them. Like, don't memorize them, know them. Know them, like, as if you were learning a language. And you're gonna get more familiar with it with more examples. So now the free planes of motion. Once again, so define the free imaginary planes of motion and provide an exercise that is performed within each plane. Define the free imaginary planes of motion and provide an exercise that is performed within each plane. In here you have the transverse plane, which divides the body between inferior and superior halves. So a movement is done in a rotational manner, side to side, like torso rotation. You have to be using the plane that divides between the superior and inferior sides of the halves of the body. The transverse plane divides the body between the inferior and superior halves of the body, so the movement is done in a rotational manner, side to side, like a torso rotation. Frontal plane divides the body into the anterior and posterior halves, front and back. The frontal plane divides the body between the anterior and posterior halves, the front and back. So the movement is done in a side-to-side motion, like lateral shoulder raises and lateral lunges, because it's side to side. You have to go over the frontal plane, which is right here. That's why it's side to side. And the sagittal plane divides the body between the left and right halves. So the sagittal plane divides the body between the left and right halves. This is the sagittal plane right here. And there is any movement that is done moving front to back to be able to hit the sagittal plane. Any movement that is done front to back, like the squats, the chest press, and the forward lunges. It's gonna be the sagittal plane. Now you have to explain the relationship. Now explain the relationship between the agonist and antagonist. Explain the relationship between agonist and antagonist. So agonist is going to be the primary muscle involved in a joint movement, while antagonist is going to be the muscle that opposes the action of a prime mover for a given movement. So that's a relationship. Agonist is the prime muscle involved in a joint movement. Like in the bicep curl, it's going to be the biceps. Biceps branch is going to be the primary muscle involved in the joint movement, while the antagonist is going to be the muscle that opposes the action of the prime mover for a given movement. Like in this case, it's going to be the triceps that opposes the action of a prime mover for a given movement. For a given movement. Now in here you have so agonist, the relationship between agonist and antagonist. Agonist is the primary muscle involved in the joint movement, while antagonist is the muscle that opposes the action of a prime mover for a given movement, for a given movement. Now explain the three levers in the body and provide an example of each. Explain the three levers in the body and provide an example for each. You have first, second, and third class levers. Levers consist of a rigid bar and an axis point of rotation. That the levers move around. Rotate around an axis or a fulcrum as a result of the force or the load, external object or effort forced by body that is applied to move the weight to move the weight against the applied resistance. To move the weight against the applied resistance. The bones is going to be the levers within the human body against the applied resistance. So the levers consist of a rigid. So listen, explain the three levers in the body and provide an example of each. Levers consist of a rigid bar and an axis point rotation that the levers move around. Rotate around an axis or a fulcrum as a result of the force or the load, external object or effort forced by the body that is applied to move the weight against the applied resistance. The bones are going to be the levers. The bones are going to be the levers within the human body. The joints is going to be the fulcrums or the axis, and the muscles are going to be to what we use to supply the effort. The muscles are going to be what we use to supply the effort to move the bones within the body. What we use to supply the effort to move the bones within the body. So you have three classes of levers. You have three classes of levers. You have the fulcrum joint. You three classes of levers. The fulcrum is going to be the joints, the resistance, which is going to be the external force. The resistance is going to be the external force coming on us, and the effort, which is going to be the muscles, and where muscles are located to differentiate between first, second, and third class levers. Uh, that there is class lever that there is lever that is there, that is there, that is there. The first that is there. The first class that is there. The first class lever that is there. The first class lever, the first class lever is going to be the fulcrum located between the effort and the resistance. The first class lever is going to be the fulcrum, which is going to be the axis or point of rotation or the joint located between the effort or the muscle and the resistance, which is going to be the load. Example is going to be skull seated on the neck. The second class lever is going to be the load, which is going to be located between the fulcrum and the effort. like in this case, the calf raise. The load is going to be located between the fulcrum, the joint, and the effort, which is going to be the muscle. And in this example, it's going to be the calf raise. The calf raise. And the third class lever is going to be the most common lever arm within the human body. The third class lever, the most common lever arm within the human body, where the effort is going to be located between the fulcrum and the load. The effort is going to be located between the fulcrum and the load. The most common lever arm within the human body, where the effort or the muscle is located between the fulcrum and the load. Located between the fulcrum and the load. In this example, you have the biceps dumbbell curl, the most common lever arm within the human body, the third class lever, where the effort is going to be located between the fulcrum and the load. And in this case, uh, that's going to be the bicep dumbbell curl, the bicep dumbbell curl, the bicep dumbbell curl, and that's it, bro. The following anatomical movements, you have flexion, like flexion where you're when you're decreasing the angle. Uh, Flexion, you're decreasing the angle between two body parts. Extension, increasing the angle between two body parts. Yeah. So the following anatomical movements, flexion is going to be decreasing the angle between two body parts. Extension, increasing the angle between two body parts. And hyperextension is increasing the angle more than you can neutrally do it. And then you have dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion for the foot. Flexion, extension, hyperextension, dorsiflexion, and plantar flexion. Flexion when increasing the angle between two body parts. Extension movement increasing the angle between two body parts. Hyperextension is going to be position that extends beyond anatomical neutron. And then you have plantar flexion, extension of the foot downward inferiorly, and dorsiflexion, flexion of the foot upward superiorly. Superiorly. So flexion, extension, hyperextension. You have flexion, extension, hyperextension. Now you have dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. You have flexion, extension, hyperextension. You have in here dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. You have flexion, extension. These are the following anatomical movements. You have flexion, extension, hyperextension. You have in here dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. There it is, bro. Horizontal abduction and horizontal adduction. Horizontal abduction, horizontal adduction. Horizontal abduction, movement away from the body. Horizontal adduction, movement towards the body. That is horizontally. Horizontal abduction, horizontal adduction. Horizontal abduction and horizontal adduction. You have external rotation and internal rotation. Externally rotated, internally rotated. External rotation and internal rotation. External rotation when you're moving it away from the body, internal rotation when you're moving it towards the body rotating. Abduction and adduction. Abduction away from the body, adduction towards the body. That's vertical. Abduction and adduction. Abduction and adduction. But in this case, it's going to be a retraction, protraction, and retraction. Protraction is abduction of the scapula. Retraction is adduction of the scapula. It's going to be protraction and retraction, actually. Protraction and retraction. It's going to be protraction and retraction. Protraction and retraction. Protraction, retraction. Protraction, retraction. Right? Protraction and retraction. Yeah. Protraction and retraction. Okay. Abduction and adduction, protraction and retraction. So define balance. Balance is going to be an even distribution of weight, enabling someone or something to maintain its center of gravity within a base of support. The ability of an individual to maintain their center of gravity within a base of support. It's going to be balance. This is protraction and retraction. Protraction and retraction. So in here, protraction, abduction, and retraction, adduction. Now, balance, define balance. An even distribution of weight enabling somebody or something to maintain its center of gravity within a base of support. Balance is going to be an even distribution of weight enabling someone or something to maintain its center of gravity within a base of support. The ability of an individual to maintain the center of gravity within a base of support. That's going to be balance. An even distribution of weight enabling someone or something to maintain its center of gravity within a base of support. The ability of an individual to maintain their center of gravity within a base of support. Balance is an even distribution of weight, enabling someone or something to maintain its center of gravity within a base of support, or the ability of an individual to maintain their center of gravity within a base of support. Now, equilibrium is a state in which opposing forces or influences are balanced. Equilibrium is going to be a state in which opposing forces or influences are balanced. It's going to be a state of equilibrium, a state in which opposing forces or influences are balanced. Now, stability. 5 more definitions, and then all of these are going to be really boring slides. Yeah. So stability describes the body's resistance to change in joint or body position, the ability to control and maintain control of joint movement or body position. So stability describes the body's resistance to change in joint or body position. That's why it's stable. Stability is going to be describe the body's resistance to change. That this stability describes the body's resistance to change in joint or body position. The ability to control and maintain control of joint movement or body position. Stability, the body's resistance to change in joint or body position. The ability to control and maintain control of joint movement or body position. And in here, the name and explain Newton's first law. Name and explain Newton's first law. Body in motion. So name and explain the Newton's first law. Body in motion tends to stay in motion, and body at rest tends to stay at rest unless it's acted on by an outside force. So the body in motion tends to stay in motion, and body at rest tends to stay at rest unless it is acted on by an outside force. Law of inertia, push, maximum amount of force that we can produce to change the direction of a given body. Stability is going to be that body's resistance to change in joint or body to position. So the stability is going to be that describes the body's resistance to change in joint or body position. The ability to control and maintain the control of joint movement or body position. Describes the resistance. Stability describes the body's resistance to change in joint or body position. Is going to be the ability to control and maintain control of joint movement or body position. And in here you have name or body position. Name and describe. Name and describe. Name and explain Newton's first law. A body in motion tends to stay in motion, and a body at rest tends to stay at rest unless it's acted on by an outside force. Law of inertia, the push, maximum amount of force that we can produce to change the direction of a given body. The law of inertia is going to be the push, a maximum amount of force that we can produce to change the direction of a given body. So the Newton's first law of motion is going to be where the body in motion tends to stay in motion and the body at rest tends to stay at rest, and this is acted on by an outside force. Law of inertia, push, maximum amount of force that we can produce to change the direction of a given body. Now the second law of motion, the Newton's second law is going to be the law of acceleration of speed or speed. Newton's second law. Name and explain Newton's second law. Law of acceleration or speed. How fast we can move a body with force. So that's going to be the law of acceleration or speed. The law of acceleration or speed. How fast we can move a body with force. Law of acceleration or speed. How fast we can move a body with force. How fast we can move a body with force. refers to the power, refers to power in which a change in direction. So law of acceleration or speed, how fast we can move a body with force, refers to power in which a change in acceleration or of mass occurs in the same direction of the force that is causing it. Law of acceleration or speed, how fast can we move a body with force, refers to the power in which a change in acceleration or mass occurs in the same direction of the force that is causing it. Force is going to be mass times acceleration, and work is going to be force times distance. Develops how fast we can move. It develops how fast we can move objects at a higher force. So it develops how fast we can move objects at a higher force, at a high force with power. Acceleration is going to be change in velocity divided by change in time. Acceleration is going to be the change in velocity divided by the change in time. The power is going to be force times velocity, and the momentum is going to be mass times velocity. So the Newton's second law is going to be the law of acceleration or speed, how fast we can move a body with force, refers to the power in which a change in acceleration or of mass occurs in the same direction of the force that is causing it. So the force is going to be mass times acceleration, and work is going to be force times distance. Develops how fast we can move an object at a high force. Power is going to be how it develops how fast we can move an object. Develops how fast we can move objects uh, at a high force. That's going to be with power. Acceleration is going to be change in velocity divided by the change in time. That's going to be acceleration defined. Change in velocity divided by the change in time. The higher change in velocity, the higher acceleration is going to be higher change in velocity, and the lower change in time. Acceleration is change in velocity divided by change in time. Power is going to be force times velocity is equal to power. Force times velocity is going to be power. Power is force times velocity. And finally, momentum is going to be mass times velocity. Power is force times velocity, and momentum is going to be mass times velocity. Now, Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The law of action and reaction. The human body provides the force to move, and the surface on which it moves provides a reactionary force, even if you don't feel it. That's Newton's third law, the law of action and reaction. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The law of reaction and reaction. The human body provides the force to move, and the surface on which it moves provides a reactionary force. Now, define center of gravity and explain how it relates to movement. Now, center of gravity. Define center of gravity and how it relates to movement. The hypothetical position in the body where the combined mass appears to be concentrated at the point around which the gravity appears to act. So the center of gravity is the hypothetical position in the body where the combined mass appears to be concentrated at a point around in which gravity appears to act. It is a point where the body can perform movement, coordination, imbalance, and stability. So the center of gravity is going to be the hypothetical position in the body where the combined mass appears to be concentrated at the point around in which gravity appears to act. It is the point where the body can perform movement coordination, imbalance, and stability. It's going to be the center of gravity. All right, after my break, I'm going to go over the muscles. So these are all going to be the insertions and origins, the muscles within the following insertions and origins, anterior and posterior, the deltoid trapezius. Then you have the muscles by body region. All of these are just going to be definitions. I'm gonna go over that after my break. Gastrocnemius soleus anterior, and then the rotator cuff. And these are all going to be after my break. After my break, I'm gonna start this one. Yeah. So remember that Newton's third law is for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. The law of action and reaction. The human body provides a force to move, and the surface on which it moves provides a reactionary force. The center of gravity explains how it relates to movement. The political position in the body where the combined mass appears to be concentrated at the point around in which gravity appears to act. It is the point where the body can perform movement coordination, instability, and balance. Imbalance and stability. Video. Yeah, yeah. As I remember, I'm gonna go over that. Let's see how this is going. I've been studying for a while. The power is going to be force times velocity, and the momentum is going to be mass times velocity. This guy has no
So the
idea where
speed of
he's
second law
here.
is going to
What
be the law.
the? Why are you here, like, for real? I'm not even joking, dudes. Just been browsing a lot of internet so far. Yeah, I'm gonna like it too. Well, bro, not Mikey. Maybe you wanna consider taking the ISSA course and become a personal trainer. I don't know, man. Anyways, I'll be right back. After my break, we're gonna continue with those definitions and then for the quiz. Principles of biomechanics. Yeah, this chapter of biomechanics is really dense, really dense. No gonna lie. And the next one is gonna be energy and metabolism, which is not as bad as this one, bro. I'm gonna lie. But anyways, I'll be right back, dude. I need to take a 10-minute break every hour. That's how it works. That's how studying works. Yeah. When I come back, yeah, after I come back, no, I'll try it right now, man. Screw it. Hold up. Yeah. Okay, we're back. This has been a good break. It happens that you need to. Sometimes you need to relax. And by the way, guys, I know, I tend to repeat. I have ADD, so I have to do that. Mm, I have to repeat the terms so that they get stored in my head because I have ADD, and sometimes it's really hard for me to read this. This is why I don't really like studying too much, and this is why I'm doing this too because it's interactive and I cannot have more fun than if I was doing it on my own. I mean, I'm still on my own, not gonna lie, but it doesn't feel that way when I'm recording myself, and then I can watch it later if I want to review, which is way better. This is why it's one of the reasons why I like YouTube because I can see this in another time, and it's gonna be in the internet. So yeah, and it's like a good memory for for my grandkids or something. I don't even know. I don't know. Whatever. Let me get more water. It's- I think I just broke my fulcrum. My fulcrum. What's the name of the ankle? No, but it's my tela. My the knee joint. It's knee joint, bruv. With the patella, the tibia, the femur. Anyways, we're gonna see right now. Uh, we're gonna continue with the study, and this is gonna be the terminology part for the muscles with the following insertions and origins. By the way, insertions and origin is not really a big part of the final exam. As you see here, you see in functional anatomy, you're not really gonna find insertions and origins. What is this? Is this from another? No, yeah. Group exercise instructor. That's actually for no, but that is if you want to get a certification for strength training instructor, which certain origins is more important. But in this case, or for personal trainer overall, from the just you say flexibility. It's rather, it's rather. I told you. If for anything, I'm talking about elevation. But in this case, insertion and origin is not really that important, so we're not going to focus too much on this. So you have insertion and origin muscles. The muscles with the following insertions and origins: the deltoid. The deltoid has its origin on the shoulder joint or the ball and socket joint, and the origin of the deltoid is in the ball and socket joint, and the insertion is in the humerus. It's gonna be for anterior for the anterior view of the deltoid. The origin is gonna be in the elbow joint, and the insertion is gonna be in the humerus joint. Posterior side, you have the trapezius, where the origin is going to be in the vertebrae, and the insertion is going to be in the clavicle, in the in the clavicle, yeah, the collarbone, the collarbone in the clavicle. For the trapezius, for the deltoid, the origin is going to be in the deltoid right here, and the insertion is going to be in the humerus. For the trapezius, the origin is going to be on the vertebrae spine, and the insertion is going to be on the clavicle. Now here you have other muscles like the anconeus. For the posterior side of the anconeus, which is going to be in the leg, the origin is going to be in the posterior side of the patella, and the insertion is going to be a little bit further down into the ulna slash radius of the patella. So that's for anconeus. For anconeus, the origin and the insertion of the anconeus in the patella, around the patella. The vastus lateralis is going to be in the anterior side. You have the vastus lateralis, which is going to be part of the quadricep muscles, the vastus lateralis. In the quadricep muscles, you have the four muscles in the quadriceps muscle, which are where We're going to see them in a bit, but for the vastus lateralis, you also have the vastus intermedius, the vastus medialis. You have the vastus lateralis, and then you have the biceps femoris. Or I think the biceps femoris for the hamstring muscles, the semitendinosus and semimembranosus. Actually, though, I'm curious. I want to watch it right now. Okay. Yeah, you have right here vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, vastus medialis, and the rectus femoris. Sorry, the rectus femoris. And for the hamstring muscles, you have the semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris. There you go. Okay, now we continue here. The deltoid, the deltoid, you have the origin and in the clavicle. Uh, no, you have the origin around the clavicle and insertion around the humerus. For the deltoid, for the trapezius, you have the origin in the vertebrae and the insertion you have it in the clavicle. Then for the anconeus, it's going to be in the posterior side of your leg, more specifically around the gastrocnemius, around the patella, around the patella. The origin is going to be in the patella, and the insertion is going to be around the radius of the lower patella. Now, the vastus lateralis is going to be the anterior portion of the patella. The insertion is going to be in the patella region where it's connected with the femur, and the insertion is going to be connected in the femur, between the femur and then the ulna and the radius, and the origin is going to be in the hip, in the hips, right here in the hips. And the gastrocnemius, you have the origin in the posterior part of the femur, and the insertion is going to be around the ankle for the posterior side of the gastrocnemius muscle. And I just want to make sure I had it in 14, I believe. There it is, dude. Fibia and tibula, my bad, dude. Ulnar radius is part of the humerus. Fibia, tibula, patella, the tarsal bone, metatarsals. Fibia and tibula. And this is going to be the ilium. The ilium. No, never forget that. So again, the deltoid, the origin and the insertion, the trapezius. You have in here the trapezius, the origin is the vertebra, the insertion is the clavicle. Then you have in the anconeus, the origin is going to be of the anconeus, the origin is on the femur, and the insertion is going to be in the tibia section of the leg. The anconeus muscle for the posterior side, the vastus lateralis is going to be on the anterior side of the patella. The insertion is going to be in in the femur and between the femur and the tibia slash fibula, and the origin is going to be around the iliacus side of the hip, anterior side, and the posterior is going to be in the gastrocnemius. The gastrocnemius has this posterior side, the gastrocnemius. You have the origin, which is going to be in the posterior side. You have the origin, which is going to be on the patella. Origin is going to be in the patella, and the insertion is going to be in the ankle. The origin of the gastrocnemius is going to be in the patella, and the insertion is going to be in the ankle. But remember that the insertions and origins is not really going to be a part of the final exam. So like all of this time was really to learn something new that is not even going to be in the final exam. But muscles by body region, this is important. Muscles by body region. So label the following muscles by body region. This is going to be the anterior side of your arm. You have the humerus. In the humerus skeleton, you have the biceps brachii in the anterior side, the long head and the short head of the biceps brachii. Then you have the triceps brachii on the backside of the humerus, which you have the lateral head, the long head, and the medial head. And then you have the branchialis in the connection in the elbow joint, around the elbow joint between the humerus and the radius and the ulna. You have the branchialis. On the posterior side, you have the triceps brachii, which you have the long head, the lateral head, and the medial head of the triceps brachii around the humerus, anterior and posterior sides. Now, this is going to be part of the shoulder, the clavicle, and the scapula. This is going to be around the scapula skeleton. Let's see. There it is. around the acromion, the clavicle and scapula. Which and remember that the scapula is a flat bone. So remember this is going to be the shoulder side, the anterior and the posterior side. In the anterior, you have the humerus, the long and short head of the humerus. In the shoulder, you have the humerus, which is you have the long head and the short head of the humerus in the shoulder. You have the clavicle. In the clavicle, you have the supraspinatus in the top, and the subscapularis, which is going to be all that muscle that is on the scapula. The subscapularis is going to be in the scapula, and then the posterior side, you have the supraspinatus in the top as well. You have the spine of the scapula. You have the spine of the scapula. Then you have the infraspinatus. You have the infraspinatus. You have the subscapularis on the anterior side, infraspinatus in the posterior side. You have the humerus, and then you have the teres minor, which is going to be your axilla muscle. It's going to be the teres minor. The teres minor around the axilla muscle in the posterior side, and then you have the spine of the scapula in the shoulder. Now the deltoid in the humerus, you have the deltoid, you have the posterior deltoid, it's gonna be in the back, the posterior deltoid, which is gonna be in the back, the lateral deltoid, which is going to be all of this lateral side of the deltoid, and the anterior deltoid. It's gonna be divided in the clavicle. In the posterior side, you have the humerus, you have the anterior deltoid, which is gonna be in red. In the front side, the posterior deltoid in the back side, and the lateral deltoid in the lateral side. In the deltoid, yeah, everyone. So shoulder, the clavicle, the supraspinatus around the clavicle, the subscapularis on the anterior side, infraspinatus, you have the posterior side infraspinatus, spinous scapula, the humerus, the teres minor, the axilla muscle, and then on the anterior side you have the humerus, the long head and the short head. On the deltoid, you have the anterior deltoid in the front, the posterior deltoid in the back, and the lateral deltoid in the lateral side in the humerus for the deltoid. Now you have the posterior side of the upper body, you have the trapezius all the way in the back from uh, which is where your pivot joint is located. This is where your pivot joint is going to be located. Let me see if I got this right. Sorry. Yeah, that's the pivot joint right there. Yeah, so the trapezius is around the pivot joint. Then you have the semispinalis capitis and semispinalis cervicis around the neck, the backside of the neck. You have the semispinalis capitis, which is going to be on the upper portion of the skull, the semispinalis capitis, and then the semispinalis cervicis, which is going to be the lateral sides of the skull. That's going to be the cervicis. Capitis is going to be all the way up, and cervicis is going to be down here. The trapezius is the important one, which is going to be all of that back muscle. The latissimus dorsi, which is it is in the pulling motion, you work in your latissimus dorsi muscle and the external obliques, which are the external portion of the abdominal region. Latissimus dorsi and external obliques. You have the trapezius, latissimus dorsi, and external obliques. In the neck, you have the semispinalis capitis and the semispinalis cervicis. You have the rhomboid minor and major, the rhomboid major and the rhomboid minor. The rhomboid minor is going to be the upper side uh, of the side of the trapezius, and the rhomboid major is going to be the like in the middle. It's going to be all that dense side of the trapezius around the trapezius. Then you have the multifidus, in the multifidus which are going to be all those muscles that are around the spinal column. The multifidus, you have the director spinae spinalis, right in the middle, director spinae spinalis. The longissimus, which is going to be around that uh, vertebrae muscle. The longissimus. You have the quadratus lumborum. The quadratus lumborum, which is going to be near the pelvis. Near the pelvis is going to be the quadratus lumborum. And finally, the iliocostalis. The iliocostalis, which is going to be really close to the rectum. The iliocostalis, which is actually closer to the lumbar spine. Iliocostalis is closer to the lumbar spine. Remember, iliocostalis is closer to the lumbar spine. Iliocostalis, you have the quadratus lumborum. in the lumbar spine, around the lumbar spine. The iliocostalis more in the middle, the quadratus lumborum more to the side. External obliques, the latissimus dorsi, the trapezius, the semispinalis capitis, semispinalis cervicis. Uh, Now you have the rhomboid minor, the rhomboid major, the multifidus, the erector spinalis, the multifidus, you have the erector spinae spinalis, and you have the longissimus, the multifidus, erector spinae spinalis, and finally you have the longissimus, iliocostalis, and the iliocostalis close to the quadratus lumborum, external obliques, latissimus dorsi, trapezius. For superficial, yeah, for the superficial and for the deep. Deep is going way more inside. So superficial is what we're focusing on, like external obliques, latissimus dorsi, the quadratus lumborum close to the lumbar spine, and the trapezius, and the semispinalis capitis. Semispinalis cervicis is more deep. Then you have the rhomboid minor and major in the trapezius. You have the multifidus around the vertebra, the rector spinae spinalis, the longissimus, and the iliocostalis, which is the lumbar spine deeper than the quadratus lumborum. So there you go. You're welcome. Now in here you have the muscles of the anterior portion of your chest. The pectoralis major, which we all know is a convergent muscle. The pectoralis major. You have the serratus anterior. The pectoralis major, you have the serratus anterior, which is like the lower portion of the the of the chest, the lower portion of the chest. Like is all of that fish-like portion that you have is the serratus anterior, the fish-like portion that you have, serratus anterior, and it actually feels kind of uh, like you can actually feel like the vertebrae over here. Let's see what's the proper name. You can actually feel the ribs, the ribs. How did I forget about the ribs, dude, Connie? How did I forget about the ribs? The pectoralis major. So you have in here the pectoralis major, you have the serratus anterior, you have the external obliques, the internal obliques, more internal, the rectus abdominals, your abdominal muscles, and in the rectus abdominals you have the linea alba, the the linea semilunaris, and the rectus shield, the rectus sheath. So the pectoralis major, the serratus anterior, the external oblique, the internal oblique, the rectus abdominals, and more superficial is going to be the linea alba, the linea semilunaris, and the rectus sheath. So definitely not going to be no test. So mainly focus on the pectoralis major, the pectoralis minor, which is going to be deeper than the pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, and the subclavius. The subclavius, which is going to be lower than your clavicle. In the clavicle, in this clavicle skeleton, the subclavius, lower than your clavicle. The pectoralis major, the pectoralis minor, and the subclavius. Now in here you have the leg muscles, anterior and posterior. First you have the psoas and the iliacus. The psoas and the iliacus muscles in the hips. The psoas is going to be mostly connected near your lumbar spine. The psoas is going to be the upper portion of your hips. It's going to be the psoas muscle, really internal, and then the iliacus is a little bit more for superficial. Psoas and iliacus, which are going to be part of your hip muscles, which are going to be in the near the ilium and the lumbar spine, near the lumbar spine right here. Uh, the pectoralis major, the subclavius, and the pectoralis minor. So here you have for anterior portion. So first you have the psoas and the iliacus near the ilium, is hip muscle, hip skeleton. Sorry. Psoas near the lumbar spine. Psoas near the lumbar spine. You have the psoas and iliacus. You have it in the uh, you have the iliacus near like the ilium skeleton, the iliacus. Psoas near the lumbar spine, and iliacus you have it near the ilium. That TFLs, the tensor fasciae latae, which is going to be in the anterior portion of your pelvis, the pelvis muscle, the pelvis girdle right here in the ilium. Is going to be the tensor fasciae latae. Then you have the sartorius, the tensor fasciae latae right over here, in the pelvic region of of the anterior portion of your leg. Then you have the sartorius, which is going to be this long muscle that is going be along your hamstrings, along your quadriceps. Sorry, sartorius is going to be around your quadriceps. The sartorius around your quadriceps. And you have the adductor longus, the muscles that allows you to move your legs towards each other is going to be the adductor longus. The sartorius, the adductor longus, you have the gracilis near the abductors, you have the gracilis, and you have the rectus femoris, is going to be the quadriceps muscles, the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, the vastus lateralis, laterally, the vastus medialis in the middle, and the vastus intermedius, intermedius. It's like the quadriceps muscle right here. The vastus lateralis, the vastus medial intermedius, right in the middle, the vastus medialis, and the rectus femoris. The gracilis, the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, and the vastus medialis. And in the posterior side, you have the gluteus medius, right above the gluteus minimus. The posterior side, you have the gluteus medius, right above the gluteus minimus, and then you have the gluteus maximus, which is all the gluteus muscle. Gluteus medius, the gluteus minimus, and the gluteus maximus. Then you have the gracilis once again. You have the gracilis. You have the vastus lateralis. The vastus lateralis. Then you have the biceps femoris. You have the rectus femoris for the quadriceps muscle. You have the biceps femoris for the posterior side in the hamstring muscles, and the semitendinosus and semimembranosus. So anterior side you have the psoas and iliacus. You have the tensor fasciae latae, the sartorius muscle, the adductor longus, the gracilis, the rectus femoris, vastus lateralis and vastus medialis for the anterior portion. And for the posterior portion, you have the gluteus medius, minimus, and maximus. The gluteus medius, minimus, and gluteus maximus. You have the gracilis once again. You have also the vastus lateralis because it's lateral, so you also have it on the posterior side. But you also have the biceps femoris, on the hamstring muscles. Then you have the semitendinosus and semimembranosus, part of the hamstring muscles. The biceps femoris, the semitendinosus, and semimembranosus for the posterior side. And then lower in the calf muscles, you have the gastrocnemius and the soleus. You have the gastrocnemius in the anterior and posterior portion of the body of the calf muscles. It's a calf muscles is right here, the gastrocnemius and the soleus muscle. The gastrocnemius and the soleus is going to be a little bit deeper than the gastrocnemius in the surfaces. So the gastrocnemius is more surface level than the soleus. Gastrocnemius is going to be the calf muscle is the gastrocnemius muscle. The calf muscle is the gastrocnemius muscle, and then the soleus goes deeper. The soleus goes deeper than the gastrocnemius. It's like lower down. Gastrocnemius is all of the calf that you feel is the gastrocnemius, and then the soleus is lower down. The tibialis anterior, if you're going to be in the anterior side, it's going to be the tibialis anterior. It's going to be all that muscle that is really close to your to your ulna bone. To your ulna bone is going to be the tibialis anterior. Then you have the peroneus longus, which is going to be near your ankle, the peroneus longus, and the extensor digitorum longus, which is going to be very, uh, that very deep, uh, very, how do you say, like narrow muscle in the foot, the tensor digitorum longus. So the gastrocnemius, the soleus, the tibialis anterior, the peroneus longus, and the extensor digitorum longus. The gastrocnemius, the soleus, the tibialis anterior, the peroneus longus, and the extensor digitorum longus. So the muscles of the rotator cuff. The muscles of the rotator cuff. So what are the muscles of the rotator cuff? There are four muscles in the rotator cuff, which is around the clavicle and the scapula. List the muscles of the rotator cuff. There are four muscles in the rotator cuff. The supraspinatus, which is going to be the one that elevates the shoulder joint out to the side. The infraspinatus, which externally rotates the shoulder joint. The teres minor, which is the axilla muscle, small muscle that helps rotate your arm. And the subscapularis, allows humerus to move freely during elevation of the arms. So four muscles of the rotator cuff, the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. Supraspinatus elevates the shoulder joint out to the side. Infraspinatus rotates the shoulder joint. Teres minor is going to be the small muscle that helps rotate your arm. And the subscapularis allows humerus to move freely during elevation of the arm. Now, the bones that make up the shoulder girdle is going to be the clavicle and the scapula. The clavicle and the scapula make up the shoulder girdle, which is going to be in the appendicular skeleton. The shoulder girdle, the bones that make up the shoulder girdle is going to be the clavicle and the scapula. And the bones that make up the elbow joint, the bones that make up the elbow joint is going to be the humerus, the ulna, and the radius. The bones that make up the elbow joint is going to be the humerus, the ulna, and the radius. And the bones that make up the knee joint is going to be the femur, the patella, which is a uh, a sesamoid bone, the femur, the patella, the tibia, the large muscle, the large bone that you feel is the tibia, and the fibula, which is a little bit narrower than tibia. So the femur, the patella, the tibia, and the fibula is going to be the knee joint. The femur, the patella, the tibia, and the fibula. Remember that the patella is a sesamoid bone, and the femur is going to be a long bone for the tibia and the fibula. So the muscles of the rotator cuff is going to be four muscles in the rotator cuff. The supraspinatus elevates the shoulder joint out to the side. Infraspinatus externally rotates the shoulder joint. The teres minor is going to be a small muscle that helps rotate your arm. The teres minor is a small muscle that helps rotate your arm. And finally, the subscapularis allows the humerus to move freely during elevation of the arm. The subscapularis allows the humerus to move freely during elevation of the arm. Now, which bone of the arm? Which bones makes up the shoulder girdle? Which bone? Which bones makes up the shoulder girdle? Which bones make up the shoulder girdle? The shoulder girdle are made up of the clavicle and the scapula. So which bones make up the shoulder girdle? They're going to be the clavicle and the scapula. The clavicle and the scapula. Now, which bones make up the elbow joint is going to be the humerus, the ulna, and the radius. The bones that make up the elbow joint is going to be the humerus, the ulna, and the radius. And the bones that make up the knee joint is going to be the femur, the patella, the tibia, and the fibula. The femur, the patella, the tibia, and the fibula. And that's going to be it for this chapter. You just want to reiterate real quick. Here it is too. The clavicle and the scapula. You have the supraspinatus, the subscapularis, the teres minor, the infraspinatus right here. Supraspinatus, subscapularis, infraspinatus, and teres minor. The spine of the scapula, the humerus, the long head, and the short head. Yeah, that's what I meant, bro. So the muscles of the rotator cuff, it's going to be the supraspinatus, elevates the shoulder joint out to the side. The infraspinatus externally rotates the shoulder joint. The teres minor, which is a small muscle that helps rotate your arm. And the subscapularis allows humerus to move freely during elevation of the arm. Allows humerus to move freely during the elevation of the arm. Bones that make up the shoulder girdle is the clavicle and the scapula. Bones that make up the elbow joint is going to be the humerus, the ulna, and the radius. And the bones that make up the knee joint is going to be the femur, the patella. The knee joint is going to be the femur, the patella, the tibia, and the fibula. The femur, the patella, the tibia, and the fibula. Yeah. Tibia is longer than the fibula. Here it is too. Ulnar and radius. Now, energy and metabolism is going to be the next one. Now, what I wanted to see is the quiz that we're going to take for this. First, uh, you have some concepts of biomechanics to go first over here. Dude, we just look at a lot of information. That's crazy. So, quiz four of concepts of biomechanics, you have three planes of motion, which are going to be sagittal, frontal, and transverse plane. Sagittal plane, left and right halves. A movement front to back. Frontal plane, you have the front and back halves, or anterior and posterior halves. The movement is side to side. And transverse plane, you have top and bottom halves, and the movement is going to be twisting. Top and bottom halves, and the movement is going to be twisting. So the principle of biomechanics. Principle of biomechanics. The principles of biomechanics. Trainer identifies repetitive movement and compensation to improve function and prevent injury. Trainer identifies repetitive movement and compensation to improve function and prevent injury. Trainer identifies repetitive movement. The trainer identifies repetitive movement and compensation to improve function and prevent injury. Stability, you have stability, force production, you have velocity. So biomechanics of a client's biomechanics of a client's sport, biomechanics of a client's sport or activity. You have identify repetitive movements and compensations associated with everyday life and non-sports exercise to improve function and prevent injury. You have the principles of biomechanics in the certified personal trainers. We should understand stability or balance. You should understand force production, velocity, loading and absorbing force. You have angular and linear movement. You have angular and linear movement, and the center of gravity, and also the center of gravity. Now you have knees and shoulders are most affected. You have the knees and shoulders that are most affected, highly vulnerable to injury. You have the knees and shoulders which are most affected, highly vulnerable to injury. You have the knees and the shoulder which are most affected. The knees and shoulders are the ones that are most affected. The knees and the shoulders are the ones that are highly more vulnerable to injury. The knees and the shoulders are the ones that are highly more vulnerable to injury. Proprioception. So you have the shoulder, the the glenohuman rhythm. You have the glenohumeral rhythm, the glenohumeral rhythm of the humerus of the shoulder. That's why the knees and shoulder are the most affected by injury, and they are highly vulnerable to injury. So the shoulder, you have the glenohumeral rhythm in the shoulder, the glenohumeral rhythm in the shoulder. Adjust for posture, load, and form of sport. So it adjusts for posture, for load, and for form for sport. It adjusts for posture, load, and form for sport. For sport. Shoulder, you have the glenohumeral rhythm. You adjust for posture, for load, and form for spot, and form for the spot. You have 8 stages of a serve. You have 8 stages for a serve. You have a preparation, release, loading, cocking, acceleration, contact, deceleration, and finish. Now you have the proprioception right here. It's the body's ability to sense action, movement, and location in space. That's going to be the proprioception. Proprioception is the body's ability to sense action, movement, and location in space. Example is going to be ability to walk without looking at our feet. Uh, Vision and vestibular system. It improves our vision and vestibular system. Vision and vestibular system. Information about balance, head, and brain body position. It follows information about balance, head, and brain body position. You have two proprioceptors. muscle spindles, and Golgi tendon organs. You have two proprioceptors, which are going to be the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendon organs. So the muscle spindles sense stretch. The Golgi tendon organs sense tension, SS and 10-10. Muscle spindles sense stretch, and the Golgi tendon organs sense tension, SS and 10-10. Spindle stretch. Golgi tendon organs sense tension, SS and 10-10. Now we're going to talk about the sliding filament theory. Describes what is happening in the muscle at the cellular level as it contracts. The sliding filament theory describes what is happening in the muscle at the cellular level as it contracts, as it contracts. The sliding filament theory describes what is happening in the muscle at the cellular level as it contracts. So each fiber is made up of sarcomeres. Each fiber is made up of sarcomeres. Inside sarcomeres are contracted protein called filaments produce actin and myosin that produce actin and myosin, which are at the heart of the sliding filament theory. So each fiber is made up of sarcomeres. And inside the sarcomeres are contracted protein called filaments that produce actin and myosin. Each fiber is made up of sarcomeres. And inside sarcomeres, there are contracted protein called filaments that produce actin and myosin, which are at the heart of the, and actin and myosin are going to be at the heart of the sliding filament theory. They are the heart of the sliding filament theory. So actin and myosin slide parallel to each other. Actin and myosin, they're going to run parallel to each other. Sarcomeres is going to be contracted protein called filaments. Each fiber is made out of sarcomeres. Inside sarcomeres, you have contracted protein called filaments. You have contracted protein called filaments, and in the actin and myosin, they run parallel to each other in the sarcomeres. Actin and myosin, they slide over one another, run parallel to each other in the sarcomeres. Actin and myosin is sliding over one another in the sarcomeres. Actin and myosin is sliding over one another. Muscles are stronger eccentrically. Actin and myosin is sliding over one another. And the muscles are going to be stronger eccentrically. The muscles are going to be stronger eccentrically. The muscles are stronger eccentrically. The muscles are stronger eccentrically. The stretch shortening cycle. The, the stretch shortening cycle, muscles are stronger eccentrically. The stretch shortening cycle, SSC, involves a press stretch of muscle immediately followed by a contraction of those same muscles. The stretch shortening cycle involves a pre-stretch of a muscles immediately followed by a contraction of the those same muscles. The stretch shortening cycle involves a pre-stretch of a muscle immediately followed by a contraction of those same muscles. Of those same muscles. Stretch shortening cycle involves a pre-stretch of a muscle immediately followed by a contraction of those same muscles. You have three phases: eccentric phase, amortization phase, mentioned between the first phase, and the concentric phase. Load and then explode. The eccentric phase, the amortization phase, and the concentric phase. The eccentric loading and concentric jump. Load and then explode. Eccentric phase, amortization phase, the transition between first phase, and the concentric phase. Load and then explode. Eccentric loading and concentric jump. Load, then explode. Eccentric loading followed by concentric jump. Eccentric loading followed by a concentric jump. Load, then explode. You have proximal. Proximal is going to be positioned closer to the center of the body relative to the reference point. Proximal is going to be a position closer to the center of the body relative to a reference point. Extension movement increasing the angle between two body parts, and shoulder is a joint that should have more mobility. The pectoralis major is the largest muscle of the chest. So the three phases is going to be the eccentric phase, the amortization phase, and the concentric phase. Eccentric loading and concentric jump. Load and then explode. Here are the questions for the quiz. What anatomical term is described as a position closer to the center of the body relative to a reference point? Is going to be proximal. Closer to a position closer to the center of the body relative to a reference point is going to be proximal. Which anatomical term refers to a movement that increases the angle between two body parts? Increases the angle between two body parts is going to be extension. Extension. Which anatomical plane divides the body into left and right halves? Is going to be sagittal plane divides the body into left and right halves. Which of the following joints should have more mobility? Is going to be the shoulder. The shoulder should definitely have more mobility. The joint that should have more mobility is going to be the shoulder. Which joint should have more mobility? The shoulder should have more mobility because it's a ball and socket joint that is to move around. Joints typically needing greater mobility. So the joints typically needing greater mobility is going to be the foot and ankle, the hip. The joints typically needing greater mobility is going to be the foot and the ankle joint, the hip joint, the thoracic spine, the shoulder, and the wrist. The joints typically needing greater stability, the knee, the lumbar spine, the cervical spine, and the elbow. This is very important. Let me see what is uh, the thoracic spine. I forgot what the thoracic spine was. I'm never gonna forget it again. Uh, the thoracic spine is all this spine right here. It's yeah, the thoracic yeah, the lumbar, thoracic, and cervical is in the middle of all the vertebrae. Yeah, on the ribs. No, in the middle of the ribs. I don't know why I said ribs. Okay. Let me see. So never forget this, dude. The joints typically needing greater mobility are going. The joints typically needing greater mobility is going to be the foot and ankle joint, the hip joint, the thoracic spine, the shoulder, and the wrist. The joints typically needing greater stability is going to be the knee joint, the lumbar spine, lower of the thoracic spine, the cervical spine, higher than the thoracic spine and the elbow. So remember, the joints typically needing greater mobility is going to be the foot and ankle, the thoracic spine, the shoulder, and the wrist. And the joints typically needing greater stability is going to be the knee joint, the lumbar spine, the cervical spine, and the elbow. A medicine ball, a medicine ball rolling around across the floor is an example of a rolling friction. A medicine ball rolling across the floor is an example of what type of friction? Of rolling friction. Which of the following is the muscle of the shoulder? A muscle of the shoulder is going to be subscapularis. Which of the following is a muscle of the shoulder? You know, is the subscapularis. Muscle of the shoulder, subscapularis. You also have the infraspinatus, supraspinatus, and the teres minor. Which of the following is a muscle of the shoulder? The subscapularis. Which three muscles make up the erector spinae group? So the three muscles that make up the erector spinae group is going to be the spinalis, longissimus, and iliocostalis. The three muscles that make up the erector spinae group, the spinalis, longissimus, and iliocostalis. And the muscle action of the rectus femoris, which is going to be on the quadriceps, is going to be flexion of hip and extension of the knee. The muscle action of the rectus femoris is the flexion of the hip and the extension of the knee. That's going to be the muscle action of the rectus femoris, and that's going to be seen on that machine where you like make like just work the rectus femoris right here. The flexion of the hip and the extension of the knee. That's going to be the muscle action of the rectus femoris. Flexion of the hip and extension of the knee. And what is the most superficial muscle of the posterior calf? The gastrocnemius. The gastrocnemius is the most superficial muscle of the posterior calf. The gastrocnemius, and the largest muscle of the chest is the pectoralis major. The largest muscle of the chest is going to be the pectoralis major. Definitely. So remember again. The anatomical location that describes a position closer to the center of the body relative to a reference point is proximal. The anatomical location term that refers to the movement that increases the angle between two body parts is going to be extension. Anatomical plane that divides the body into left and right half is going to be the sagittal plane. The joint that should have more mobility is going to be the shoulder. Joints typically needing greater mobility, the foot and ankle, the hip, the thoracic spine, the shoulder, and the wrist. And joints typically needing greater stability is going to be the knee, the lumbar spine, the cervical spine, and the elbow. The medicine ball rolling across the floor is an example of the rolling friction. Medicine ball rolling across the floor is an example of a rolling friction. Which of the following is a muscle of the shoulder? Muscle of the shoulder is going to be subscapularis. Muscle of the shoulder is going to be subscapularis. But we also have the the su, the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and the teres minor. Uh, Now you have the three muscles that make up the erector spinae group. The three muscles that make up the erector spinae group is going to be the spinalis, the longissimus, and the iliocostalis. The spinalis, the three muscles that make up the erector spinae group is going to be the spinalis, the longissimus, and the iliocostalis. The muscle action of the rectus femoris is going to be flexion of the hip and extension of the knee. You have to imagine the the rectus femoris workout on a machine. The muscle action of the rectus femoris is going to be flexion of the hip and extension of the knee. The most superficial muscle of the posterior calf is going to be gastrocnemius. The most superficial muscle of the posterior calf is going to be gastrocnemius. The largest muscle of the chest is going to be the pectoralis major. The largest muscle of the chest is the pectoralis major. And after that, I'm taking my break. Uh, Remember, for muscles of the rotator cuff, the supraspinatus elevates the shoulder joint out to the side. Infraspinatus externally rotates the shoulder joints. Teres minor is small muscle that helps rotate your arm, and the subscapularis allows humerus to move freely during elevation of the arm. And and the bones that make up the shoulder girdle is going to be the clavicle and the scapula. The bones that make up the elbow joint is going to be the humerus, the ulna, and the radius. And the bones that make up the knee joint is going to be the femur, the patella, the tibia, and the fibula. And now I'm going to take my break. I'm going to take my break now, bro. And then we're going to go over energy and metabolism. Do I have the time like for that right now? Uh, I already, yeah, it's been like an hour. Okay. Yeah, that was the end of chapter 5. That was a lot, bro. That was a lot. Man, I don't even like it. Am I even like live right now? I want to see that, bro. Yeah, I'm live. I'm live. Live right now? I have two people watching. I have two people watching right now. Yeah, man, studying is really it's really annoying for me. Not gonna lie, studying is really annoying for me because I'm like, am I actually like processing the information? Am I like that's what is annoying. That's why it's like so much information, 140 questions, 125 of them are graded. Like when it comes to muscles, I'm a visual person, so I know where they are located. The definition is that's the hard part, you know. When they ask me to define the function of it, that's where I die. To be honest. I'm really counting on my memory for this exam, the energy and metabolism. Yeah. Now we're gonna go over energy and metabolism. Inosine triphosphate. And this is gonna be way easier for me because I already went over this chapter so many times that it's already. I mean, I already know that all of this information, you know, I kind of understand it. It's all about like uh, having the patience to do it. You know, that's why I'm going to have the patience. 15 minutes and then 10-minute break. You know, like that's how it should. Oh, it's all about patience, after all. What I like about this chapter is that it's only one quiz. Like that doesn't have any notes for the quiz like the other one, so it should be faster. I expected. Guys, we're back. Uh, yeah, we have 1 more hour. We have 1 more hour, so we're going to try to do this as fast as possible. To be honest. Uh, Energy and metabolism is a chapter that is not as dense as biomechanics chapter. So because the problem about biomechanics chapter is about all this terminology in the muscles and the bones and how they interact with one another, and then the anatomical positions. It's a lot of terminology, that you just have to be familiar with, especially because in the exam you're actually gonna have questions that are gonna use that terminology so that you understand what it means. And a lot of those questions are gonna be part of the exam. Great, finally. So you have to be familiar with it. So, anyways, the chapter 6 is about energy and metabolism. But something that I just want to point out is that I don't believe that for energy systems, like for this chapter, look, you only have to explain how that body uses fuel and creates energy, calorie intake, output, basic metabolic rate, and total daily energy expenditure, which we're gonna go over, identify the different energy systems in the body, definitely the ATP-CP, glycolytic and oxidative, and then explain the benefits of aerobic and anaerobic training. So we don't really have to see biology, which is one of the parts. Like when we first start a chapter, the organelles that make up, we don't really need to learn this. It's not something that is necessary. Even in the, if you see the quiz, what the fuck did I do? Like the questions are mainly based on those other points. So that's why I don't recommend like having to spend time studying those, like the amount of like how a cell is composed, like studying about like the lysosomes, the nucleus, the mitochondria. All of these are biology terms that they're not going to be on the test, And if they're on the test, I'm really sorry that I told you this. I apologize, but I don't see, if you read this, it's not on the test, so we're not gonna go over it too much. Anyways, we're gonna get started. This very straightforward chapter. Hopefully by 4:20 we're done. That's my hope. So let's do this, bro. Let's freaking do this, all right? Who's watching right now? Let me see. Let me see who's watching. So I say hello. Uh, watching right now. Let me see. Let me see who's watching. You have two people watching. And a lot of those questions are gonna be part of the chapter 6 is about energy and metabolism. But something that I just wanna put like for, so we're not gonna go over it too much. Anyways, we're gonna get started. This very straightforward chapter. Hopefully by 4:20 we're done. That's my hope. So let's do this, bro. Let's freaking do this, all right? Yeah, let's freaking do this. Okay. Thank you for the likes, by the way. Appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate you. Just... damn it. But damn it. I promise I'm straight, all right? Anyways, I don't know why I say that. Yeah, let's get to this. We're gonna go over chapter 6, energy and metabolism, and it's Pride Month anyway. So I'm not gay, and even if I was, who cares? It's Pride Month, right? Oh my God, I'm just joking, bro. Ener- let's do this, man. And energy and metabolism, chapter 6, learning objectives. Define and explain the three primary energy systems in the human body and the energy molecule they create. This describe how the energy systems overlap and define metabolism and energy balance and the factors that affect each. So those are the learning objectives. I have AED, so I have to read it twice. Energy metabolism. Learning objectives is going to be define and explain the three primary energy systems in the human body and the energy molecule they create. Describe how the energy systems overlap and define metabolism and energy balance and the factors that affect each. So ATP is going to be adenosine triphosphate. It's an energy carrying molecule used to fuel body processes. They are made of phosphate group, which is going to be the three bonds that hold those phosphates together. Then they're followed to ribose, and it's going to be separates the phosphates Separating the phosphate releases energy, and to adenine. And the adenine is going to be the one that stores energy when we restore them. Stored energy when we restore them. It's going to be the molecule of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, an energy carrying molecule used to fuel body processes. An energy carrying molecule used to fuel body processes. Made of the phosphate group, which are like the free bonds that hold those phosphates together, to the ribose, which is going to be the separating the phosphate releases energy, and to the adenine, which is going to be stored energy. The adenine is going to be the stored energy when we restore them. Stored energy when we restore them. The energy metabolism and ATP. You have the body metabolizes the food that we eat into three different pathways: energy metabolism and the ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So the body metabolizes the food that we eat through three different pathways. You have the ATP pathways, which are going to be ATP-CP pathway, the glycolytic pathway. Both of them are anaerobic pathways. They do not use oxygen. And the oxidative pathway, which is aerobic, it uses oxygen. It's an aerobic pathway. So the ATP-CP energy system it uses the creatine phosphate. That creatine phosphate, the creatine that you use to for the pre-workout, that white powder that you use before your workouts. That's the creatine phosphate used in the ATP-CP system. The creatine phosphate is a compound that is stored in our muscle cells. Creatine phosphate, CP, is a compound that is stored in our muscle cells. From 0 to creatine phosphate is a compound that is stored in our muscle cells. It goes from 0 to 10 seconds in the duration of activity. A compound that is stored in our muscle cells. It goes from 0 to 10 seconds in the duration of the activity. Adenosine diphosphate has two phosphates, and adenosine triphosphate has three phosphates. So the NTPCP energy system, the creatine phosphate, is a compound that is stored in our muscle cells from 0 to 10 seconds in the duration of activity. So adenosine diphosphate has two phosphates, and adenosine triphosphate has three phosphates. Adenosine phosphate, to go from the ADP to the ATP, creatine phosphate comes into play. The creatine phosphate comes into play by dominating the phosphate to the ADP, and ADP donate a P to the ATP. The creatine phosphate comes into play by donating the phosphate P to the ADP, and the ADP donate a P to the ATP. So that's the adenosine diphosphate to the adenosine triphosphate. The anaerobic glycolysis is going to take 10 seconds to 2 minutes. The anaerobic glycolysis takes 10 seconds to 2 minutes of work. For the anaerobic glycolysis, from 10 seconds to 2 minutes of work. We don't need oxygen in this pathway. It doesn't use oxygen. This pathway doesn't use oxygen. We don't need oxygen in this pathway. Now, the anaerobic glycolysis doesn't use oxygen. It uses one molecule of ATP to convert glucose into the glucose phosphate. It uses one molecule of ATP to convert glucose into the glucose phosphate. And glycogen breaks down into glucose, that breaks down into 2 ATP and pyruvate. So glycogen breaks down into glucose, that breaks down into 2 molecules of ATP and a pyruvate molecule. We don't need oxygen in this pathway. Uses one molecule of ATP to convert glucose into glucose phosphate, and glycogen breaks down into glucose, that breaks down into 2 molecules of ATP and pyruvate to convert glucose into glucose phosphate. And the glycogen breaks down into glucose that breaks down into ATP and pyruvate. Carbohydrates are broken down into glucose as it is digested, which raises our blood sugar. Carbohydrates break down into glucose. Carbohydrates break down into glucose as it is digested, which raises our blood sugar. So the carbohydrates are broken down into glucose as is digested, which raises our blood sugar. Carbohydrates break down into glucose as it is digested, which raises our blood sugar. Now, Pyruvate breaks down into lactic acid. Pyruvate is important because it breaks down into lactic acid, which is transported into the liver. Pyruvate is important because it breaks down into lactic acid, which is transported into the liver. Lactic acid is a combination of glycogen plus glucose. So lactic acid is a combination of glycogen, or the molecule of glycogen plus glucose. Uh, Lactic acid is used to make ATP, glucose in the liver, and it is a signaling uh, and it is a signaling molecule in our body. So lactic acid is used to make ATP, glucose in the liver, and it is a signaling molecule in our bodies. So the pyruvate gets to make lactic acid. The pyruvate breaks down into lactic acid, which is transported into the liver, and lactic acid is a combination of glycogen plus glucose. Lactic acid is used to make ATP, glucose in the liver, and it is a signaling molecule in our bodies. It's used to make ATP, glucose in the liver, and it is a signaling, and it is a signaling molecule in our bodies. Lactic acid is used to make ATP, glucose in the liver, and it is a signaling molecule in our bodies. In our bodies. Now you have the oxidative energy pathway. The oxidative energy pathway is an ATP pathway. ATP pathways and oxidative pathways are aerobic. It's going to be an aerobic pathway. The oxidative energy pathway is dominant in sustaining activities lasting longer than 2 minutes. The oxidative energy pathway is going to be dominant in sustaining activities lasting longer than 2 minutes. Oxidative energy pathway is going to be dominant in sustaining activities lasting longer than 2 minutes. Gluconeogenesis is creation of glucose from things that are not carbohydrate related. So gluconeogenesis is a term describing the creation of glucose from things that are not carbohydrate related. It can be fat, it can be protein, but not carbohydrate. ATP pathways is broken down into oxidative pathways. So ATP pathways is broken down into oxidative pathways, aerobic pathways in the presence of oxygen. So ATP pathways is broken down into oxidative pathways, and the aerobic pathway is means in the presence of oxygen. Oxidative energy pathways takes pyruvate and sends it into the Krebs cycle, which is going to be composed of fatty acids, and are broken down into electron transport chain, into an electron transport system, and protein. The electron transport system breaks down into 38 molecules of adenosine triphosphate. 38 molecules of adenosine triphosphate. That's crazy, man. The speed at which we create ATP, the speed at which we create ATP is related to the intensity that we're working at. Releases 100% of our energy. So the speed at which we create the ATP is related, the speed at which we create the adenosine triphosphate is related to the intensity that we are working out. It relates that we are working at. It relates 100% to exercise. So the speed at which we create ATP is related directly to the intensity that we are working at. It relates 100% to exercise. Relates 100% to exercise. You store ATP first. The metabolic pathways and time are always working. All free energy pathways are providing you with energy. They overlap. They overlap. The ATP-CP pathway energy supplies decreases faster. Glycolytic pathway, the energy supply reaches a high point and then decreases. And the oxidative pathway, energy supply increases slowly before reaching a high point. Creatine is the most researched organic compound. Creatine is going to be the most researched organic compound in the market. The creatine is the most researched organic compound in the market. So the ATP-CP is going to be produced creatine phosphate on P to make ATP, uses ADP from initial full source. Duration of the activity is going to be from 0 to 10 seconds. Example of activity is going to be 100-meter run, and it's going to be without oxygen, anaerobic. Glycolytic, breaking down of glucose to produce more ATP. Glycogen is the stored form of glucose. Glycogen is going to be the stored form of glucose from 10 seconds to 2 minutes. Example is going to be a 400-meter run, and it's still going to be anaerobic without oxygen. An oxidative needs oxygen. Oxidative cycle needs oxygen and uses the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. Needs oxygen and uses the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. delivers a lot of energy, but slowly, and it is made in more than 2 minutes. In more than 2 minutes, the duration of activity is going to be more than 2 minutes. Example is going to be a 1 mile run, and it's going to be aerobic with oxygen. All of these processes happen in the mitochondria. It's overlapping, and it happens in the mitochondria. All of these processes are going to happen in the mitochondria. It's going to be a cell that is very important, the mitochondria. All these processes happen in the mitochondria. And the metabolic pathways and time, all three energy pathways overlap. The ATP-CP just goes down. Energy supply, so metabolic pathways and time are always working. All three energy pathways overlap uh, and are providing you with energy. They overlap. ATP-CP pathway, the energy supply decreases fast. The percentage of energy supply decreases fast. The glycolytic pathway, the percentage of energy supply reaches a high point and then decreases, and the oxidative pathway, the percentage of energy supply increases slowly before reaching a high point. The percentage of energy supply increases slowly before reaching a high point. Creatine before reaching a high point. And the creatine is going to be the most researched organic compound in the market. Creatine is going to be the most researched organic compound in the market. It's going to be creatine, the most researched organic compound in the market. You're going to also see that in supplementation, the supplementation chapter later on. Metabolism is going to be the sum of all chemical reactions taking place in the body. Metabolism, sum of all the chemical reactions taking place in the body is metabolism. The sum of all the chemical reactions, the sum of all the chemical reactions taking place in the body is metabolism. It's an homeostatic process. The sum of all the chemical reactions taking place in the body is metabolism. It's an homeostatic process. Anabolism is going to be building molecules that requires energy. Anabolism is building molecules requiring energy. And catabolism is going to be the breakdown of molecules. Catabolism is going to be breaking down molecules, and it releases energy. Catabolism releases energy. Rates of anabolism and catabolism tend to stay in balance. There is a balance between the rates of anabolism and catabolism, so that you don't lose or gain too many molecules at the same time. So rates of anabolism and catabolism tend to stay in balance. Metabolism is an homeostatic process. Metabolism is a homeostatic process, and the rates of anabolism and catabolism tends to stay in balance. So metabolism, food intake. Now, metabolism, food intake. Calories are all created equal. Metabolism, food intake. Calories are all created equal. Calories content from the meat. So the metabolism, food intake. Rates of anabolism and catabolism tend to stay in balance. And the metabolism, food intake. Uh, Calories are all created equal. Metabolism, food intake, the calories are all created equal. The calories content come from the free macronutrients. From carbohydrates, you have 4 calories per gram for carbohydrates. For protein, you also have 4 calories per gram. And for fat, you have more than double, 9 calories per gram for fat. That's why fat is more calorie dense than both protein and carbohydrate combined. This is why fat is more calorie dense than both protein and carbohydrate combined. Now, the metabolism caloric expenditure. The metabolism caloric expenditure, you have first the resting metabolic rate, which is going to be 70% of your total daily energy expenditure for the metabolism caloric expenditure. The metabolism caloric expenditure, you have the resting metabolic rate, which is going to be 70% of your total daily energy expenditure. Then you have exercise-induced thermogenesis, or that exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the percentage of the total daily energy expenditure from exercise. Specifically, it's going to be 5%. Now you have the thermic effect of food, which is going to be 10%, like how the body uses energy to process food. Thermic effect of food is going to be 10%. And the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, any activity that is non-exercise related, is going to be 15%. The non-exercise activity thermogenesis is 15%. So the percentage of your total daily energy expenditure, the percentage of the total that percentage of your total daily energy expenditure, you can actually estimate it, the caloric expenditure using for male and female using a formula. The percentage of the total daily energy expenditure. you can actually estimate caloric expenditure from you can actually estimate, so 70% from the resting metabolic rate, 5% from the exercise-induced thermogenesis, 10% from the thermic effect of food, and 15% from the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's for the percentage of the total daily energy expenditure. So now, the estimating caloric expenditure for male and female. The estimating caloric expenditure for both male and female. Estimating the caloric expenditure from both your male and the female partners. Estimating caloric expenditure for male and female, they're going to be different. Alpha is going to be the activity level factor. It's going to be metric and imperial. Metric and imperial is going to be imperial is in pounds, calculations for male and female. The activity level factor, you have ALF, sedentary is 1.2, likely active is going to be 1.375, moderately active is 1.55, very active is 1.725, and extremely active is going to be 1.9. Now you have the daily caloric expenditure, DCE. You have the height in centimeters, the height in inches. You have the weight in kilograms and the weight in pounds. Now you have the energy balance, calories in versus calories out. The energy balance is going to be calories in versus calories out. Energy balance, EB, calories in versus calories out. Calories in versus calories out. Eating more than we are burning on our daily basis. So calories in versus calories out. Eating more than we are burning in our daily basis. So we have to eat more than we are burning in our daily basis. Calories in is going to be from protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and the calories out is going to be from the exercise, from daily activity, and from the resting metabolic rate. Calories in and calories out, eating more than we are burning on our daily basis. So calories in is going to be made from protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and calories out is going to be from exercise, from daily activity, and from the resting metabolic rate, from resting metabolism. We need to have more calories in than calories out on a daily basis to be in balance. So we need to have more calories in than calories out on a daily basis to be in balance. We need to have more calories in than calories out to be in balance. So we need to have more calories in than calories out on a daily basis to be in balance. Remember that. You need to have more calories in than calories out on a daily basis to be in balance. Energy balance, calories in versus calories out. Eating more than we are burning on our daily on energy balance, calories in versus calories out. Eating more than we are burning on our daily basis. Calories in is going to be protein, fat, and carbohydrate, and calories out is going to be exercise, daily activity, and resting metabolism. We have to have, we need to have, we need to have more calories in than out on a daily basis to be in balance. So we need to have more calories in than calories out on a daily basis to be in balance. So if you wanna gain weight, if you wanna gain weight over time, you had a positive energy balance, consuming more calories than you burn. If you gain weight, it's because over time you had a positive energy balance, consuming more calories than you burn. That's why you gain weight, because you had a positive energy balance. You consume more calories than you burn. Positive energy balance means gain weight, and negative energy balance means lose weight. Positive energy balance means you gain weight, and negative energy balance means that you lost weight. You lost weight. And finally, the BMR calculator estimates the basic metabolic rate for you. The BMR calculator estimates the basic metabolic rate for you. That's going to be the BMR calculator. Estimates the basic metabolic rate for you. And that was it for this model. After this, you have you have the in the workbook, the energy and metabolism. to be the femur, the patella, the tibia, and the fibula. Sorry about that, guys. I have ADD. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. I have ADD. Anyways, we are going to for energy and metabolism. Anyways, somebody watching? Sorry about that, guys. I have ADD. Anyways, we are going to for energy and metabolism. Anyways, somebody watching? Sorry about that, guys. I have ADD. Oh, damn it, dude. That is gonna go forever now. Okay. Energy and metabolism. Chapter 6. Chapter 6, energy and metabolism. Is gonna be, yeah, the energy and metabolism, the workbook. The workbook for energy and metabolism, chapter 6, energy and metabolism. This is what I meant that we don't really need. List the organelles that make up the cell. You don't really need to know these organelles that make up the cell. You have to list them. Surrounded by the plasma membrane, the organelles of the cell include the nucleus, the ribosomes, the endoplasmic reticulum, Rubens smooth, the Golgi apparatus, the lysosomes, and the mitochondria. The cytoplasm is the viscous fluids inside a living cell, excluding the nucleus, but it is not considered an organelle. So the nucleus has its own membrane and holds deoxyribinoic acid. It holds the DNA, which is a self-replicating genetic material in human cells. A self-replicating genetic material in human cells. Ribosomes, small cellular organelles involved in the polypeptide and protein synthesis made up of protein and ribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid, RNA. ER is going to be the endoplasmic reticulum, a network of tubules attached to the nuclear membrane in cells. Organelles that forms a nucleus, that forms a network of canals within the cytoplasm and is continuous with nuclear membrane. Ribosomes attached rough, not no ribosomes attached smooth. Golgi apparatus is an organelle of folded membranes responsible for packaging and transporting membrane-bound proteins. Near the nucleus and the endoplasmic reticulum. It creates ventricles or valves that move proteins from inside the cell. So membranes will be released to their final destination in the body. Lysosomes serve as a digestive system of the cell and are filled with digestive enzymes that breaks down materials cells have absorbed. And the mitochondria is going to be the powerhouse of the cell. It's important. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It is an organelle that with a double membrane and many folds inside responsible for generating the chemical energy needed for biochemical reactions. During a process called oxidative pulse speed or whatever, the mitochondria convert macronutrients into chemical energy for the cell. Phosphorylation for the cell. Yeah, all of these are just terms, dude, for the energy and metabolism chapter. Uh, and this is, oh my god, yeah. Yeah, I'll be right back. I'll be right back, and then I'm gonna complete this, bro. Because I'm almost done anyway, so yeah. I'll be right back. Meanwhile, I am going to connect this. I know I said no breaks, but dude, I really need to take a break, to be honest. Just 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay. We're gonna finish this real quick. Okay, guys, no time to waste. How are you? Hey, let's see this, bro. So, the energy and metabolism. You have seven terms that you need to define. List the organelles that make up the cell. The organelles that make up the cell are going to be surrounded by the plasma membrane. The organelles of the cell include the nucleus, the ribosomes, the endoplasmic reticulum, the rod and smooth, the Golgi apparatus, the lysosomes, and the mitochondria. The cytoplasm is the viscous site. The cytoplasm is going to be the viscous fluid inside a living cell, excluding the nucleus. But it is not considered an organelle. The nucleus it has its own membrane and holds deoxyribonucleic acid (DNA), which is a self-replicating genetic material in human cells. DNA is going to be a self-replicating genetic material in human cells. It's going to be a nucleus. It's going to be the DNA is a self-replicating genetic material in human cells. The ribosomes are going to be small cellular organelles involved in the ribosomes is going to be the small cellular organelles involved in polypeptide and protein synthesis made up of protein and rubionic acid. That's going to be the ribosomes, the small cellular organelles involved in the polypeptide and protein synthesis made up of protein and rubionic acid, the RNA. The the endoplasmic reticulum, is going to be a network of tubules attached to the nucleus membrane in cells. Organelles that forms a network of canals within the cytoplasm that is continuous with the nuclear membrane. Ribosomes are going to be attached. They're going to be the ribosomes are going to be attached. They're going to be roughed. If the ribosomes are attached in the endoplasmic reticulum, they're going to be rough endoplasmic reticulum. If there are no ribosomes attached, it's going to be a smooth endoplasmic reticulum. The Golgi apparatus is an organelle of folded membranes responsible for packaging and transporting membrane-bound proteins. Located near the nucleus and ER, it creates vesicles of or transport bubbles that move proteins from inside the cell to the cell membrane to be released to their final destination in the body. Now, the lysosomes serve in the digestive system, serve as the digestive system of the cell, and are filled with digestive enzymes that breaks down materials the cell has absorbed. And finally, the mitochondria is going to be the powerhouse of the cell, and it is an organelle with a double membrane and many folds inside responsible for generating the chemical energy needed for biochemical reactions. During a process called oxidative phosphorylation, the mitochondria convert nutrients into chemical energy for the cell. The mitochondria convert macronutrients. The mitochondria convert macronutrients into chemical energy for the cell, for the cell. Now, where the lysosomes serve as the digestive system of the cell and are filled with digestive enzymes that breaks down materials the cell has absorbed. And mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It is an organelle with a double membrane and many folds uh, inside responsible for generating the chemical energy needed for biochemical reactions. During a process called oxidative phosphorylation, the mitochondria converts the macronutrients into chemical energy. The mitochondria converts the macronutrients into chemical energy for the cell, into chemical energy for the cell, for the cell, for the cell. Now, let me period right there. Where does the energy come from that fuels our physical activity? So, where does the energy come from that fuels our physical activity? From the food, the macronutrients that, such as the carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Ingested by the digestive system, they must be broken down to be used at the cellular level for energy production. The carbs are one of the main sources of energy for the body and are broken down into glucose or stored as glycogen in the liver for and muscles for future use, or they are stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles for future use, for future use. What is homeostasis? A self-regulating process by which the body maintains the stability of its physiological processes for the purpose of optimal function. So homeostasis, remember that the metabolism is an homeostatic process. Remember that. The sum of all the chemical reactions taking place in the body is an homeostatic process. And homeostasis is a self-regulating process by which the body maintains the stability of its physiological process for the purpose of optimal function. So homeostasis is a self-regulating process. Homeostasis is going to be a self-regulating process by which the body maintains the stability of its physiological processes for the purpose of optimal function. Now, metabolism is going to be all of the chemical processes that occur in the body to support life, including the converting food into energy. It's an homeostatic process. Remember, metabolism is an homeostatic process, remember. Metabolism is going to be the sum of all of the chemical processes that occur in the body to support life, including converting food into energy. Now, list and define the two phases of metabolism. List and define the two phases of metabolism. They're going to be anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism are building molecules requiring energy, and catabolism are the breakdown of molecules releasing energy. So anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism are the building molecules requiring energy, and catabolism are the breakdown of molecules releasing energy. Releasing energy. Resting metabolic rate. What is resting metabolic rate? The energy expenditure of metabolic and physical processes when the body is at rest. That's resting metabolic rate, RMR. The energy expenditure of metabolic and physical processes when the body is at rest. Its total daily energy expenditure percentage is about 70%. It includes the energy required to support cardiac function and respiration, repair internal organs, maintain body temperature, and balance water and ion concentrations across cell membranes. That's resting metabolic rate. The energy expenditure of metabolic and physical processes, resting metabolic rate. The energy expenditure of metabolic and physical processes when the body is at rest. Its total daily energy expenditure percentage is about 70%. It includes the energy required to support cardiac function and respiration, repair internal organs, maintain body temperature, and balance water and ion concentrations across cell membranes. That's going to be resting metabolic rate, about 70% of the total daily energy expenditures. What is the thermic effect of food? The TEF is going to be the energy associated with the breakdown of food by the body. The TEF is the energy associated with the breakdown of food by the body. TEF is the energy associated with the breakdown of food by the body. The catabolic effect of the food by the body. So TEF, the thermic effect of food, is the energy associated with the breakdown of food by the body. The TEF accounts for the heat loss when the body digests carbohydrate, fat, and protein in food and makes about 10% of the total daily energy expenditure. Also referred to as diet-induced thermogenesis. The TEF uh, the TEF varies based on the macronutrient. For example, fats have a lesser thermic effect. Uh, for example, uh, Fats have a lesser thermic effect during digestion and absorption than protein and carbohydrates. For example, fats have a lesser thermic effect during digestion and absorption than protein and carbohydrates. For example, fats have a lesser thermic effect during digestion and absorption. Fats has a lesser thermic effect during digestion and absorption than protein and carbohydrates. So TEF is energy associated with the breakdown of food by the body. The TEF accounts for heat loss when the body digests carbohydrates, fat, and protein in food and makes up about 10% of the total daily energy expenditure, also referred to as the diet-induced thermogenesis. TF varies based on the macronutrient. For example, fat has a lesser thermic effect during digestion and absorption than protein and carbohydrate. Video. Now, this is going to be filling the following charts. Filling the following charts This is going to be energy systems. You have anaerobic without oxygen. You have ATP-CP and glycolysis. Anaerobic with oxygen. You definitely have oxidative. The energy systems. The energy systems. The energy systems. The energy systems. Fill in the following chart. The energy systems. Anaerobic without oxygen. You have ATP-CP and glycolysis. And aerobic with oxygen. You have oxidative. Now fill in the following table. Fill in the following table. You have nutritional. Fill in the following table. You have nutritional carbohydrate. You have 4 calories per gram for carbohydrate, 4 calories per gram for nutritional protein, and 9 calories per gram for nutritional fat. Now in here you have use the following table to answer the questions below. This is going to be for the total calorie daily expenditure. For the caloric daily expenditure, estimating the caloric expenditure, you have the formula. Fill the following table. Use the following table to answer the questions below. So you have to use the following table to answer the use the following table to answer the questions below. The question below is going to be calculate the estimated caloric expenditure for a male client with the following information. So that it's going to be a male, and this is the caloric energy expenditure for male. The activity is going to be likely active. If it is likely active, you have an activity level factor of 1.375. Age is going to be 33. You multiply the age by 6.76. You have the weight of 165 lbs in imperial, and it's going to be like about 74.8 kilograms if you use metric, and the height is going to be 6.2 inches, or 74 inches, or a 6 feet with 2 inches, or 74 inches, or 188 centimeters. It's a really tall guy. And you have to calculate the daily calorie expenditure for a male client with the following information. So then it's likely active. So that means that daily calorie expenditure in metric. If you want to use metric, because you can use both, they gave us information in metric and in imperial. Then it's gonna be you have to use this formula right here. The ALF of likely active 1.375 times 13.75 times the weight, which is going to be 74.8 kilograms, plus 5 times the height, which is going to be in centimeters, 188 centimeters, minus the 6.76 times the age, the age which is 33. You have about 2,400 calories of the daily calorie expenditure. You have about you have about 2,400 calories. You have about 2,400 calories, about 2,400 calories of the daily calorie expenditure, of daily caloric expenditure. Now define each of the following terms and fill in the chart. So now you have to define each of the following terms and fill in the chart. TDEE is going to be the total daily energy expenditure. In percentage is going to be TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. EAT, exercise induced thermogenesis or exercise activity thermogenesis. EEF is going to be the thermic effect of food. NEET is going to be non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and then RMR is going to be the resting metabolic rate, which is about 70% of your total daily energy expenditure. And here is the percentage. Total daily energy expenditure, the resting metabolic rate is going to be about 70%. Now, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis is going to be about 15% of the total daily energy expenditure. The thermic effect of food is 10%, and the exercise-induced thermogenesis or exercise activity thermogenesis is going to be 5%. It's going to be 5%, yeah. The resting metabolic rate is going to be 70%. So 70% resting metabolic rate, 50% non-exercise activity thermogenesis, 10% is going to be thermic effect of food, and 5% is going to be exercise activity thermogenesis. Total daily energy expenditure is the sum of all of them. It's going to be 100%. So define ATP, 100%. Define ATP and briefly discuss. So you have to now define ATP and briefly discuss the free energy pathways that produce ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, the energy carrying molecule used to fuel body processes made up of free phosphate groups, ribose and adenine. Glucose and fatty acids are converted into ATP, and when energy is needed in the cell, the bond of the N-phosphate is broken and energy, heat, and nitrogen ions are released. During physical exercise, ATP is used in muscle cells to generate muscle contraction. During contraction, ATP is broken down by the enzyme ATPase. This causes a phosphate group to split from ATP to generate energy and create adenosine diphosphate and a free phosphate P. The ADP and P attach to the myosin head and bind to the actin filament. The ADP and P attach to the myosin head and bind to the actin filament. Now, for the cell to continue to work, more ATP must be created. This is done in several ways depending on the intensity and duration of activity. The body metabolizes the food we eat through three distinct energy pathways. It's going to be ATPs, the ATPs, creatine phosphate system, ATPCP, anaerobic glycolysis, and the oxidative pathway is going to be aerobic. Each energy pathway is effective at producing energy for various intensities and durations of activity. Each energy pathway is effective at producing energy for various intensities and durations of activity. Each energy pathway is effective at producing. Each energy pathway is effective at producing energy uh, and for various intensities and durations of activity. The body stores a limited amount of ATP in the muscle cells. The body stores a limited amount of ATP. The body stores a limited amount of ATP in the muscle cells, and this ATP is available for immediate energy needs. The body stores a limited amount of ATP in the muscle cells, and this ATP is available for immediate energy needs. The stored ATP can only supply energy for up to 10 seconds of work. After stored ATP is used, the cell creates energy using the intermediate energy of the ATP creatine phosphate pathway. This energy pathway is anaerobic, meaning it does not require the presence of oxygen. For activities that last from 10 seconds to 120 seconds or 2 minutes, and when the immediate demand for oxygen is greater than the supply, and when the immediate demand for oxygen is greater than the supply, the body must tap into the second energy pathway. Anaerobic glycolysis it uses one molecule of ATP to convert glucose to glucose phosphate. Glycogen can also be used in this process. Glycogen can also be used in this process. Anaerobic glycolysis produces a metabolic byproduct called lactic acid. Anaerobic glycolysis produces a metabolic byproduct called lactic acid, and is sometimes referred to as a lactic acid system. So anaerobic glycolysis produces a metabolic byproduct called the lactic acid, and is sometimes referred to as the lactic acid system. When cells exhaust the immediate ATP, when cells exhaust the immediate ATP energy stores, when cells exhaust the immediate ATP energy stores and glucose has been depleted, the aerobic energy pathways will begin to dominate energy production. The aerobic energy pathways are dominant in sustained activities lasting more than 120 seconds or 2 minutes and include the process of aerobic glycolysis, uh, fatty acid oxidation, fatty acid oxidation, fatty acids oxidation, and in extreme circumstances, and in extreme circumstances, gluconeogenesis. The oxidative energy pathway is aerobic and uses the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain to produce a large amount of ATP and deliver a lot of energy slowly during low intensity aerobic activities or at rest. So the oxidative energy pathway is aerobic and uses the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain to produce a large amount of ATP and deliver a lot of energy slowly during low intensity aerobic activities or at rest. The oxidative energy pathway is aerobic and uses the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain to produce a large amount of ATP, about 38 ATP, and deliver a lot of energy slowly during low intensity aerobic activities or at rest. During low intensity aerobic activities or at rest. Period. That's gonna be the ATP defined and briefly discuss the three energy pathways that produce ATP. Yeah, adenosine triphosphate, yeah. And here, filling the graph below with the free energy pathways, filling the graph below with the free, filling the graph below, filling the graph below, filling the graph below with the free pathways, filling the graph below with the free pathways of energy production. In here, you have ATPCP that lasts from 0 to 10 seconds, and the percentage of energy contribution or energy supply depletes immediately after 10 seconds, like a 100-meter sprint. Glycolytic system lasts from 10 seconds to 120 minutes, and like 400 meter swim, and it reaches a high point and then it goes down. An aerobic system over 2 minutes is going to be the oxidative pathway, like a marathon, for example, over 2 minutes, and it develops slowly, it increases slowly. The graph below with the free pathways of energy production. And that's it, bro. The next one is going to be client assessments. That's it. The next one is client assessments. We're going to go over the quiz. Energy and metabolism is going to be the quiz. The largest muscle of the chest, remember, is the pectoralis major. Energy and metabolism. Where in the cell do the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain occur? That's going to be the aerobic oxidative pathway in the mitochondria. Where in the cell does the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain occur? Remember, in the mitochondria. Gain weight is a positive energy balance, lose weight a negative energy balance, and BMR calculator estimates the basic metabolic rate for you. Now, this is a question for the energy and metabolism. Where in the cell do the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain occur? In the mitochondria. Now, which two values are required to calculate the respiratory quotient? The two values that are required to calculate the respiratory quotient, the RQ, they're going to be the volume of carbon dioxide exhaled and the volume of oxygen inhaled. The two values required to calculate the respiratory quotient. Volume of carbon dioxide exhaled and volume of oxygen inhaled. Now, the respiratory quotient for carbohydrates is going to be 1. Respiratory quotient for carbohydrates is 1. Remember that the respiratory quotient for carbohydrates is going to be 1. Which energy pathway is dominant for activities generally lasting from 10 seconds to 2 minutes? It's going to be the anaerobic glycolysis. Energy pathway that is dominant for activities generally lasting from 10 seconds to 2 minutes is going to be anaerobic glycolysis. Anaerobic glycolysis. What is the primary byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis? The primary byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis is lactic acid. Remember that. The primary byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis is going to be lactic acid. What is the point at which the body switches from the metabolism requiring oxygen to primarily anaerobic metabolism called anaerobic threshold? The point when the body switches from the metabolism requiring oxygen to primarily anaerobic metabolism is going to be the anaerobic threshold. Anaerobic is going to be anaerobic threshold. The Krebs cycle and electron transport chain are steps in which energy pathway, the oxidative energy pathway. Please, bro. The Krebs cycle and electron transport chain are steps in which energy pathway in the oxidative energy pathway. The Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain are steps in which energy pathway in the oxidative energy pathway. In the oxidative energy pathway. How many calories per gram are in a fat? How many calories per gram are in a fat? So how many calories per gram are in a fat is 9 calories per gram. For a fat, you have 9 calories per gram. For a fat, 9 calories per gram. The Harris-Benedict equation incorporates the resting metabolic rate and an activity level factor to determine what metabolic information the daily caloric expenditure, the DCE. Definitely the daily caloric expenditure, the DCE, is going to be for the Harris-Benedict equation incorporates the resting metabolic rate and an activity level factor to determine what metabolic information the daily calorie expenditure. And what is the general recommendation for a calorie the general recommendation for a daily calorie deficit for someone looking to lose body fat? The general recommendation. What is the general recommendation for a daily calorie deficit for someone working to lose body fat? That's going to be from 200 to 500 calories. Lose body fat general recommendation is going to be 200 to 500 calories of a daily calorie deficit. The general recommendation for a daily calorie deficit for someone working to lose body fat is going to be from 200 to 500 calories. Body fat is going to be from 200 to 500 calories. From 200 to 500 calories. And those were the questions for the energy and metabolism. Those were the questions for the energy and metabolism chapter. Yeah. Energy and metabolism quiz 5. The largest muscle of the chest is the pectoralis major. So that's where in the cell does the Krebs cycle and electron production occur in the mitochondria. What values are required to calculate the respiratory quotient, the volume of carbon dioxide exhale, and volume of oxygen inhaled. The respiratory quotient for carbohydrates is 1. Energy pathway that is dominant for activities generally lasting from 10 seconds to 2 minutes is going to be the anaerobic glycolysis. What is the primary byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis? The primary byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis is going to be lactic acid. The point which the body switches from metabolism requiring oxygen to primarily anaerobic metabolism. Khaled is going to be anaerobic threshold. The Krebs cycle and electrons of transport chain are steps in which energy pathway in the oxidative energy pathway. How many calories per gram are in a fat? Is going to be 9 calories per gram. The Harris Benedict equation incorporates the resting metabolic rate and an activity level factor to determine what metabolic information is going to be the daily calorie expenditure. The daily calorie expenditure, and finally, what is the general recommendation for a daily calorie deficit for someone working to lose body fat? Is going to be 200 to 500 calories. The general recommendation for a daily calorie deficit for someone working to lose body fat, is going to be from 200 to 500 calories. Is going to be from 200 to 500 calories. Is going to be from 200 to 500 calories. Thank you very much. 200 to 500 calories of daily calorie deficit. Thank you very much. There you go, bro. And the next one is going to be a line assessment. So I finished all of the applied science. I finished all of the anatomy, all of the functional anatomy. I only need to no, but the minor kinetic chains are going to be in I believe it's chapter 8, if I'm not mistaken. Biomechanics, the study of human motion, energy systems, and psychology and physiology. Sorry. International range the result from exercise. Sliding filament theory, aluminum theory. Difference between muscle fiber types and how they react to exercise. So yeah, all of that is going to be part of the applied science portion of the examination weight, 25% of the test. And that was it, dude. I'm really tired. I I finish. It's 4:27. I'm done with chapter 6 and chapter 5. We did it. So the next one is going to be chapter 7, 8, and 9. So now we're gonna go over client assessments. We're gonna go over elements of fitness and the principles of program design for the next one. Yeah, and this the conference gear measurements. The kinetic is gonna be incline assessment. The kinetic change checkpoints. That's what I mean, dude. Yeah, yeah. All this. Yeah, this is gonna be a long one, bro. This is gonna be a really long one. I'm gonna lie, bro. For real. We have to do it. So it's gonna be line assessments. And the good thing is that we already like we were running through the workbook. Look, we're already in page 45 right here. After that, we were in page 45. So yeah, guys, this has been the Alpha Master. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this can help somebody, especially me, especially me because I'm trying to pass uh, this freaking exam. The NCCPT Accredited exam. I'm really trying my best. So anyway, guys, I'm tired, but I cannot do anything about it. So this has been the Alpha Master, and see you later. How about?